Good morning. Hello. How is everybody? Oh, Peggy's sneezing in the background. Good morning. Good morning. How are we doing? Hello. Hello. Thanks for joining me. If you're new here, hi. This is Troubleshooting the Tarot. So this live stream series is where I just kind of come on and I do not have any pre-planned agendas or topics. You all bring those. So I will, as people throw questions into the chat, anything tarot, oracle, reading related, looking for tips or thoughts, etc., throw that stuff into the chat. I will star it as we go. And then we're going to just hang out and I'm going to answer your questions. So it's not like Q&A about me, but a Q&A about how we read, how we work with cards. So whatever, as long as it's in that realm, we're pretty good. Krita asks, will the stream be available later tonight? Is Eurovision Song Contest night. Oh my God, that's exciting. Yes, absolutely. So replay will be available. And also, I would love to hear from you all what you thought, because what I did is last time we got together for one of these, actually it was Peggy. Peggy went through the whole thing and timestamped some of the questions for me. And then I clipped those out into individual smaller videos that I've been putting out on the channel for people who want little snapshots of some of the tidbits that come out of these streams. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. It was a new type of content creation for me, so I would love to hear what you all think. Also, I do give a little perk to my Badass Unicorns, which is the top tier of my channel membership, and they get to ask questions in advance. If you are a Badass Unicorn and you're watching and you forgot, I think I saw somebody say something, you can still go throw it on the post, because I've got 2 on the list already from Badass Unicorns. We'll do those first. Any other Badass Unicorns want to go add your comments or your questions rather to that post, so we can do those first, that would be great. Yeah, and then we'll just kind of hop in. And if there's not a lot of questions, that's cool. Then we won't be here as long. And if there's a lot, we'll probably be here a little bit longer. And that's kind of how this will go. Oh, thank you for the feedback on the clips. That was actually Peggy's idea a while back. She's like, you could just clip out chunks, and then, because she watches clip videos. She likes to watch live stream clips from other people's streams. And she says, I really enjoy those shorter bits. And I was like, oh, it never occurred to me to do that. Thank you, Krita. Appreciate it. So let me, without much further ado, and also I haven't had coffee, and this can go one of multiple ways. One, well, my unicorns know, because I always come on with my coffee, not having taken the first sip. I'll either be a little bit higher energy because I'll be like, I don't know, extra distractible, or I'll be a little bit slower. We'll see how it'll go. So good. Yay. Okay. Thank you, y'all. Hello, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. It's so good to see you. So yeah, I'm going to hop over to that post for my members and grab those. Again, Badass Unicorns, if you add any questions over there, just let me know so I can refresh the list. So the first one on that list is from Michelle, who is in chat now. Let me just grab it. And I'm going to copy and paste it over here. Good morning, Nicole. Hi, Jackie. Okay, so let me post Michelle's question. I don't know if it'll all show up in one. We'll see. Probably not, but that's okay. We'll put the first part up. So I'll read the whole thing. Michelle says, oh yeah, she posted this on the comment on another video. I'm like, oh, please remember it and share it when we do troubleshooting. But she said, oh yeah, isn't the deck you choose a big part of reading intuitively, because that determines which specific cards you'll see? Asked another way, what is the impact of deck selection on a reading? So this is a great question. And again, y'all, if anybody else has questions, you can just throw them in chat and I'll star them as I see them. So that way I can kind of bookmark them and come back to them. So my thoughts on this, I have so many thoughts on this. Yes, I would say the short answer is yes, absolutely. Deck selection can be a huge part of intuition. When I read professionally from home, so when I've had my readings closed for a while because I've been so busy. When I read in a shop, right, I will usually have a small selection of decks available. Or if I read in public, I'll have a small selection of decks available, depending on what I'm doing. And then that selection of decks will determine what my options are, because of course I can't bring my entire collection, which would be amazing, but isn't going to happen. And then usually I'll have them stacked, like laid out on the table. And I would ask my client if they're drawn to any particular deck. And that becomes a part of the conversation and a part of the reading. And absolutely where they are drawn will also influence the reading in that way, in my view. Now, other people's views might be different, but that's how I view it. When I am at home and I'm reading when I have my full collection available and somebody were to book a reading, two things would happen. They would either request a deck, which didn't happen super often, or I would select one for the reading. And absolutely, that is a huge part of intuition because I might be drawn to a particular deck. I've got a story to tell about this actually. So I had somebody who reached out for a reading who had, I don't think ever had reached out for a reading before. And this person, their question wasn't super intense, as I recall. I sort of trained myself to forget my readings. I'm happy to tell you all about that at some point. But I can't remember the question, but I remember it wasn't particularly shadow themed or intense or anything like that. But for whatever reason, I was drawn to pull the Deviant Moon. Now that was notable because the Deviant Moon is a very polarizing deck. Some people really enjoy it, but the people that don't really don't. And I was 100% in the really don't camp for a long time. So I have a lot of like understanding and empathy for people who are like, ew, on the Deviant Moon. I totally get it. I think it's cool, but like I also have been on the other side of that. So it was really odd and actually made me feel kind of self-conscious that I was drawn to use that deck because I'm like, shoot, if this person doesn't like this, then that's going to be an issue. But I was like, you know what? So I just owned it in the reading. This was a recorded reading. So I got the deck and I talked to this person up front and just said, hey, I was really drawn to pull this particular deck. I hope that's okay. I said, I feel a little nervous about it because I don't usually pull this in for client readings. It was actually the first time I'd ever done that. And so I ended up doing the reading and some really, really like poignant and specific and somewhat difficult things came out of that reading that were very clear to me, like very specific, like past experience stuff, very specific things that were influencing this client. And I would not have gotten those messages if not for those cards. And in particular, I remember one of the cards, because the reading I don't remember, but I remember one of the cards was the Four of Cups in the Deviant Moon, which had a very particular and very personal meaning for this particular client in that moment. And that card had come up. And so that person came back to me afterwards and gave me feedback, which was so appreciated. And basically said, that was the perfect deck. That was exactly what I needed. Like that message was completely on point. And it just gave me a lot of confidence to remember that giving myself permission to listen to that inner voice that's like, you know what, use this deck this time is really important because you can definitely get a much deeper reading and a much more nuanced reading when you allow yourself to sort of, I don't know why this phrase has been in my head this week, but kind of go where the energy flows. Like if you're being drawn in that direction, it's probably for a reason. There's certain decks I tend to gravitate toward for certain types of readings for sure. But for the most part, that allowing yourself to go, what feels right for this question, and then pull that, whether you're reading for yourself or for somebody else, is a whole other layer to reading that allows you to explore in new directions and in new ways. So I think absolutely is the short, I gave my long-winded answer, but absolutely is the short version of the answer. And to go to the second part of the question, what was the other thing that was said here? What is the impact of deck selection on reading? Now, that's my personal experience. I should also say that in addition to that, there are people who that isn't really a factor. For example, if you are a style of reader, and this is a valid style of reading, who kind of maintains a fairly consistent interpretation of the cards, regardless of which deck you're using, which a lot of readers are that way. Like if a Six of Swords is a Six of Swords, no matter which deck it's in, and you're going to read it roughly the same way, no matter what. If you have a more rote style and I would argue a slightly less intuitive or vibey style to your reading, again, still valid, completely still valid. If that's your style, then the deck selection will have a much less impact on the reading. But if you're somebody who, do I have a deck that yeah, sure. Let's switch the view real quick. If you have a deck, which one do I want to do? Do I want to do this one? Sure. Let's swapsies. Okay. Where is, I was going to just pull, what do I want to pull actually? Let's pull, okay, let's pull the Tarot of Oneness mini, because it's nearby. Okay. So if you're the type, this is a great example right on top, actually. Okay. So some people, like I said, they're going to read the card the same regardless, right? But if you're the type to lay out cards, so here's some examples. We have the Wheel of Fortune, we have the Three of Cups, and we have the Five of Cups. Let me zoom us in. Whee! And then I'll move these over here. Hopefully it's focused. I can't really tell because, again, I'm not very awake. Okay. So if you have these cards from this particular deck, this is not a Rider-Waite-Smith, so the imagery goes its own way, but it's really, I love this deck so much because you're in the first person. It's just the coolest thing. Anyway, but if you're the type of person to look at this and not think of the Rider-Waite-Smith every time you look at these cards. So when you see the Wheel of Fortune, if you're going to always think of that Rider-Waite-Smith wheel and who's on top and who's coming down and who's coming up, or however you interpret the Wheel of Fortune typically, then this imagery isn't going to have much of an impact on you. But if you read a little bit more like me and others, right? Hi, Stardust. If that's the case, then you might look at this Wheel of Fortune and consider the impact or the layer of the maze on this interpretation. Is this speaking to your client or your own feeling like it's very difficult to get to the heart of a situation? Maybe you're kind of lost in the maze. Is that what the Wheel of Fortune traditionally might mean? Not necessarily. But if you tend to go with the imagery and allow it to lead you through a reading, regardless of the rote understanding of that card, then imagery on decks is going to have a profound impact on the way you read. Similarly here, the fact that each of these characters is drinking something a little bit different or has made their coffee or their tea a little bit different might be a part of your interpretation. It might not be about the three friends coming together and the fact that they're all having coffee or tea together. It might literally be about the fact that each one of them has prepped their coffee or tea differently. And what does that say? And then over here in the Five of Cups, you might notice that little, oh God, I'm going to say an animal and I'm going to embarrass myself. A deer, right? A female doe, a deer, a female deer. Yeah. Okay. A doe. If you might hone in on that. You might hone in on the way this person is sheltering or is blocking the sun. There might be different ways that you hone in on the meaning of the card outside of the rote meaning of the card. This is something that I get into intensely in my course, Intuitive Tarot Reading, that I have up on my website, because I basically teach a method for learning how to do that, how to get out of your way, I guess, and how to learn how to allow your intuition to lead a reading. But in short, if you are the type that tends to read that way, then absolutely card imagery is going to have a huge impact. And that is that because I do read that way. It's one of the reasons why I find it so immensely satisfying to have a large selection of decks to choose from, because that becomes something where every reading is, I mean, we have infinite combinations with the tarot, right? We have infinite possibilities for how we might read a card. But then when you add additionally all the different imagery from all the different decks, you have infinite on infinite ways to possibly get a reading. Thank you for throwing your questions in the chat. And don't be afraid to type question in all caps, or put, I just noticed somebody put a question emoji, or members have the members question emoji. If you want into your comment, I'll be more likely to spot it, especially if chat gets pretty busy. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for doing that. So that was Michelle Russell's question, one of our badass unicorns. I'm just scrolling in case I mixed any. Stardust is like, ding, 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 Ado. I did it, y'all. See, I can do it. It's so funny. I had some feedback on a recent video. It was, oh, that's too much. That's too much tipping. I feel like I'm really low. I'm just trying to fix it. That's my laptop camera. So anyways, is that perspective weird now? Am I just neurotic? Can I not, like, okay, let's just see if I can fix it. Anyways, I had some feedback. It was on the Wizard of Oz Tarot, and I kind of giggled, because anybody who's been watching my channel for a long time knows my memory for pop culture, movies, TV, animals, so many other things is just terrible. It's just terrible. Anyways, and a couple people were frustrated that I didn't remember more specific things about Wizard of Oz when I did that walkthrough, and it was cracking me up, because I'm like, are you new here? Like, do you not know? This is like literally how I am. But yes, absolutely, and I'm loving the feedback in the chat as well. You're welcome, Michelle. Yeah, Jennifer says, yes, I've had powerful and unbelievably specific info come out when my client chooses a deck, or I intuitively choose a deck for an online client. Yes, 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 totally. Totally, totally, totally. Okay, so there's another one from Justin, one of our badass unicorns. How do I stop using tarot predictively? This is such a juicy question. Let me throw this into the chat and pop it on the screen. Stardust, that's hilarious. I know. See, but most people it's mostly a charming game, right? Like mostly we're like this is just Lisa being Lisa and it's fine. And we all can giggle at my scatterbrainedness and that's totally fine. But I'm like, no, for real though, if y'all want me to like know all the things you're not in the right place. Like I can talk for like 18 hours in a row about tarot and symbology and like how I read and that kind of stuff. But if you ask me like who some actor is in the latest popular movie, I don't know who that is. I kind of know the name. If you ask me who sung a song, it's not going to happen. I was talking to Danny. Sorry, this is off topic. I'll put the question down for just a second. I was talking to Danny and we were talking about Doctor Who and she's like talking to me about all the different doctors and I didn't even know how Doctor Who worked. Like it was a hilarious conversation. Anyways, we're talking about Doctor Who while we're filming Hot Takes and I don't even know how we got on the topic, but anyway, we're just sidebarring as we do. We film for like 2.5 hours and then we get the video out of that because we're just hanging out. But anyways, and it was so funny because she's like, well, I like this actor who played the doctor. And like, then there's this actor who played the doctor. And I didn't know who none of these people were. And I'm just like, And I'm like, I wish I could be the person that could have this conversation with you, but I'm just not that person. But anyways, okay. I'm sorry. I had to sidebar. I am a squirrel. This is what happens. Okay. Anyway, Justin asks, oh yes, how do I stop using tarot predictively? So this is a valid question, actually. Some people naturally find themselves reading predictively. Some people intentionally lean into reading predictively. Did my screen just freeze? Some people naturally lean into reading predictively. Others don't necessarily believe in reading predictively or don't want to believe or don't want to read predictively. That just isn't in alignment with how they want to work with their cards. So this is completely valid. Stardust says I have a Who pusher in my life too. That's so funny. Okay, anyway. So how do you stop? So I guess the question, Justin, you're in here, right? I feel like I saw you. I think the question to ask you, especially in the spirit of like what you're looking for here, is to ask yourself or for me to ask you, I guess I should say, in what ways do you find yourself reading predictively that you want to shift? Like, do you feel like you tend to, I'm going to give an example. So like maybe you don't know how to do a card a day reading without reading predictively, or like a month ahead or a general reading without reading predictively, because by nature, a month ahead is a predictive reading, right? That might be the issue, the sticking point. So maybe you could shed some light on where you're particularly getting stuck with wanting to not read predictively. And then I can give you some tips because I read pretty grounded in the present. My stuff always tips a bit predictive, of course, and I don't mind reading predictively, but my readings for myself are much more present based. Okay. So Justin says, I find that it causes way more anxiety. I totally get that. Like I asked about getting a new job and I pulled the 5 of Pentacles and that has caused me so much anxiety. Okay, valid. So one of the things that happens when we work with tarot is this might be a personality thing. This might be like just knowing ourselves, right? This might be a reaction thing. This might be just a poor fit for ourselves energetically, but we might find ourselves sort of abdicating our power to our cards. And I've seen this a lot with clients I've read for, with friends. I've seen it with family members. I've done it. It's very easy to ask a question, get an answer, and then that answer becomes it rules us. It rules over us. I actually watched a really incredible talk by oh gosh, I'm gonna forget her name now on the fly. Of course I am. Oh my gosh, I've watched her talk a bazillion times. Huge fan. Okay, the co-creator of the podcast, the Fortune's Wheel podcast with MM They've written a book together. Somebody type. Help me. My poor memory in action. I literally know who she, like, I could rattle her name off every other day, but now I'm like looking at my bookshelf for inspiration. Nope, blanking. T. Susan Chang. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was bothering me. Anyways, T. Susan Chang did an incredible talk where she used the card of the day and talked about this very subject. And I'm not going to regurgitate everything she said, but one of the things that she did, I couldn't remember even if I wanted to. But one of the things she kind of discussed was this idea that we sort of can abdicate our power. We can let the tarot tell us how our day's going to go. And then we can find ourselves self-sabotaging or becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you get the Tower card and you're asking how your day is going to go, you're going to be looking for that tower all day long. Most of us will. That's what we'll find ourselves naturally doing. And so instead, she kind of basically created this entire talk. It was at a tarot conference. She created this entire talk and kind of guided us through this process of like taking that and working with it with intentionality, taking control of that thing, turning it into a bit of a spell or a manifesto for your day that can carry you through, which I thought was a really cool take. Again, I couldn't tell you the specific, she got deep into it. We were looking at planetary hours and like the whole bit. It was quite cool. But at its face, if you pull a card, that deck's in order. That's no fun. Let's pull another tarot of oneness card and flip my view again. If you pull a card for yourself for your day, and we'll get into precise questions in a minute, but let's just say you're just doing a card. Okay, what's my card of the day today? And you pull, oh, how convenient. I pulled the Devil. It's like this deck really wants to work with me. And you're like, great. I'm going to fall into old habits. I'm going to pick a wife. No, I'm going to pick a fight with my wife, whatever. Like this is the kind of stuff I might think if I'm abdicating my power in the reading, right? I'd be like, oh, well, great. There goes. My day's trash now. And it's a very easy mentality to shift in. Instead, there's a few methods I can share that work for me. One, and this is again for a general reading, and I will get to your point, Justin, I promise, about a more specific question. But let's say it's a general reading. My shift in perception comes when instead of seeing this as a prediction of how my day is going to go, I view my card of the day as a teacher that has advice for me for my day ahead. What would the devil tell me to keep in mind as I move through my day today? And that is really, really helpful. In fact, I'm going to sidebar for a second because I live for sidebars. This is what we do. But, and again, feel free to keep popping questions in if you guys think of them. Oh, I have hair in my mouth and it's mine. I'm sorry. I think I got it out. Oh, did I distract myself already from my sidebar? What was I saying? Oh, yes, that's what I was going to say. The tarot project I'm working on that maybe next year, maybe later, depends on how quickly I get my stuff done. That tarot deck is literally a deck of 78 teachers in a way. That is sort of the vibe. It's called Convocation of Witches. It's a deck of mostly of elderly people, mostly grandmas. I've shared some art. We're actually trucking along through the majors right now with me and Francesca. But in any case, in that deck, I'm actually giving a short bit like words of wisdom from this character. What advice would this character give you? Because I find that that's a really grounded way to look at the cards and also to hold on to your power. Because if somebody gives you advice, you get to decide how you're going to apply that advice. So if I pull the Devil card, I might be like, well, the devil might tell me to couple things. The devil might encourage me to be a little bit loosey-goosey with here, I'll put the box cover so you guys know what deck I'm looking at. This is the Tarot of Oneness Mini. The devil might encourage me to lean into a little bit of naughtiness today. Maybe I don't be so rigid with the rule following today. Maybe I loosen up a little. Maybe I walk towards the darkness a little in a rebellious but powerful way. Or the devil might warn me. The devil might be like, you know what? I'm here to remind you what temptation looks like. I'm here to remind you how easy it is for you to slip into bad habits. So maybe today you focus on not giving into your bad habits quite so much. Maybe today you try to pay attention and stay mindful and create more space in conversations and listen more than you talk in order to allow yourself to not get sucked into those bad habits you want to avoid. So now I'm in conversation with this card. This card isn't telling me what's going to happen. This card is walking me through what I should keep in mind as I move through my day. And this method works really great as well. If you like to pull cards at the end of your day to reflect on your day, you're like, what did I learn? And this devil might come out and be like, and I can apply the devil to something that I experienced that day. And what did I learn from that? And so this is one way you can handle it in a general reading. And actually you'll see this play out because the way that I do daily pulls, is I do an energy obstacle advice. I came up with the spread a long time ago. I've talked about it a ton on the channel, but energy obstacle advice is a really, really great way for me to check in with my day, because with that, I'll just try to make sure the box is sort of visible in case anybody's curious. Okay. So I'm going to pull 3 more cards. So energy obstacle advice. This is what a daily general pull would look like for me, right? So my energy is the 4 of Pentacles. So the energy of the day might be one of where safety is really important, or I need to just kind of recognize that this is maybe not the day to take a whole lot of risks. Like this is a day to sort of stay mindful and be present and not maybe stick my neck out too far. So maybe if I was thinking about reaching out to, I don't know, ask, like I'm married, but let's say you're going to ask somebody for a date. Maybe this isn't the risky day. Maybe this is the day we just kind of like chill a little bit. So the energy of the day is one of conservation rather than risk and spending, etc. Same thing, you could apply it to shopping and stuff too. But generally that the energy of the day is one of like safety and like staying in your safe zone, right? The 6 of Cups is the obstacle. The 6 of Cups is all about the past, memories, past experiences, etc. And that card is my obstacle. So something I might bump up against today, something I might want to be aware of is I might have a tendency to compare the present to the past. I might have a tendency to wish for something simpler, something easier. There might be something like that that bumps up that I just need to be aware of. See how it sounds kind of predictive, but it's still advice oriented. It's kind of like things for me to consider, not this is what's going to happen. Does that make sense? And then finally, my advice for the day is the 8 of Wands. Just keep moving forward. Like let the day just take me where it's going to take me. Be a little bit more open, but don't be so like, this is maybe the day for me to initiate things, but to kind of go with the flow. So that might be like one way that I do like a general. But to get to the point of now you've asked a specific question. To stop reading predictively, number one, we need to stop asking predictive questions. So if you don't want to get an answer that's going to give you anxiety about like, so instead of saying, am I going to get the job? I would never ask that of the tarot. Or even, how is my interview going to go? I wouldn't ask that question, because if I got a crap card, I'm going to feel anxious too. So 1000% I'm with you on that. But if I want to know about it, or if I want to prep for it and I want to go to the tarot for some guidance, then I'm going to say something like, how can I best prepare for this interview? That's advice. If I word the question like I'm looking for advice, then my answer is going to give me advice. So we have life. Oh, cool. I got some bonus cards. Life force, energy, perspective, and the embodiment, which is basically the King of Wands. So what do I need to do to prepare for this interview? And answering the question with these 3 cards, life force, energy. I need to walk in there like with engagement and interest. I need to be in a place of being not hyper, but definitely energetic, ready to like engage. I need to be present. Perspective. I need to remember that look at all these balloons. This is not the only job. So I need to not go in there as if it's like life or death, be all end all. There's always going to be another opportunity. So I need to walk in not like putting so much pressure on myself or this interview. And then the embodiment of Wands, the King of Wands is all about like knowing your skills, like knowing what you bring to the table, bringing that charisma, bringing that confidence to that engagement, to that appointment or interview, right? So this is going to be how I should approach the interview. Now I've got advice to frame my experience, but nothing here has told me what the outcome is going to be. And the reason I don't like reading in general for predictive outcomes, and I don't, even when I read predictively oriented, I'm always reading trajectory, not fixed outcome, because I don't believe in reading fixed outcomes. So that's my own personal belief. People's mileage may vary. But also because looking at a trajectory assumes that you're going to stay on the current path. You're going to continue doing what you're doing. You're going to continue to move in that direction, or do things that stack on top of that direction, and therefore are likely to go in that direction. For example, if you're having marriage difficulty and you're working on it actively and you're putting the steps in place, right, to do things better, to engage better, you're on a trajectory to improve your marriage. But if you get a tarot reading that's like, well, your marriage is doomed to fail, how are you going to feel about continuing to try? But instead, if you look at a trajectory reading, it's like, well, if you continue to do the work you're doing, you're on a really good course. What you want to be aware of is not straying over here, not doing this over here. And so you can kind of get into that as a reader. So that's my very long-winded answer to that question. I hope that was helpful. Justin, let me know if that clarified things for you. I wasn't really watching the chat very well, so let me also scroll for questions. But Yes, use it as a heads up that you're free to change instead of a fated thing. Free will, baby. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, I do love my tangents. It's true. Yes. The Forgotten Storyteller says, I love thinking about each tarot card as teachers with wisdom to give. Yes, sometimes teachers are wrong. Absolutely. But often they see things we can't see. So it's worth at least contemplating what they have to say and why. This is such a clear way to sum up what I'm saying, right? Like when we see the cards as guides, mentors, teachers, advice givers, we give ourselves the power to take their advice or not, because y'all know we're gonna. How many times have you read for somebody else if you read for other people? And you know, even as you're laying the cards down and telling them they are not going to take this advice. And that's okay. That, again, free will. But we as humans we're rebellious creatures. We're not always going to take the advice given to us. But that is the beautiful thing, because that is where our power sits. I don't want to be the type of tarot reader that leaves people feeling like without my guidance, they can't function. And I've talked about that before, but I think it's actually really important to maintain whoever you're reading for, that they are in charge of their life, not you. I think that's really, really important. It's a huge part of my personal reading ethos. And I think it's just massively, massively important. Yay. Okay, good. I'm glad it was helpful, Justin. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So I think I'm going to refresh my badass unicorn list, but I think those were our only badass unicorn questions. Doop, doop. Okay, yeah, those are the only ones on the list. So now I'm just going to work through them in the chat in order. So keep adding to the list if you want. Throw a question in chat. If a question I'm answering springboards you to a different follow-up question, go ahead and throw them in there. But I'm going to start here with my first tagged question, which looks like it's from Artie. Artie, I think you're a badass unicorn, by the way. Yes, Stardust, dooming someone to a fate is the worst thing you can do. Totally agree. Yeah, Lady says, great video. I like to look at it as how am I reacting to a situation rather than an outcome. 100%. Yes. Okay, so Sean asks, my question is, you fancy it is regarding, wait, my question is, you fancy it is regarding your practice rituals around shuffling and asking your query question. I don't know if I understand this. Are you kind of asking what my practice and ritual is around shuffling and asking my question? Is that kind of I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. So clarify, please, in the chat, if you would, what it is you're looking for here, and I will happily answer. Major typo fail. That's okay. That's all right. Just tell me what you mean, and then I'll pop that one up on the chat. And let me grab a really fun to shuffle deck, because I want one. Why do I not have Sassy Dragons in here? What's wrong with me? It's in the living room. That's why. Do I want to mix up this? I don't really want to. Oh, that's a good one, isn't it? Sure. Let's grab my Travel Monstero. It's not like I don't have like 8 editions of this deck. I have like 4. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I keep wanting to go pop my camera up. My biggest failure in life is hitting send before reading. I use an app called Grammarly, which always catches all of my well, not all. If I actually pay attention to it, it's really easy to tune it out. It's like a spell grammar checker, and it's always available, like when I'm typing an email or whatever. I think it's even worked in YouTube comments when it's on my desktop. I'm just waiting for a little clarification from Artie, and then we'll go. But I've got my Monstero ready to go. I don't know if this deck is still available. Does anybody know? This is so cute. Okay. Oh, there we go, Artie. Okay, perfect. So would you share your practice or rituals around shuffling and asking your query? Okay. I'm very loosey-goosey, if I'm being real. The main thing, the heart of it, the simple answer, the short answer is I shuffle while I'm focusing on my question. Especially if I'm reading for myself. That's basically all I'm doing. I'm shuffling while I'm focusing on my question. And as far as like the ritual, if I'm reading for somebody else, it looks a little different. So let me talk you through that. Now, this is a visualization exercise that I do habitually. I taught myself to do it a long time ago because I felt like 2 things. Number one, I do have a tendency to be a bit of an energy sponge. So I do tend to absorb other people's energy and stuff. So that's something that I have to be wary of all the time. It's just kind of how I'm wired. So with that being the case, I didn't want to, as I started to read for other people, especially because as a new reader, I felt like all my readings were really heavy. And really, I think today they're still heavy. It's a style of reading I have, I think. But I was doing a lot of soul cards readings. I was looking into a lot of like past stuff for people, getting really into it, like really into it. And I was like, number one, wow, this is really personal. And the style of reading I had was back in the beginning, in the first like 5 years or so that I read, as I was getting my feet under me as a reader, I would usually instruct whoever I was reading for, usually friends and family, 90% of the time in those first years. I would say, please don't tell me your question. Let me just pull the cards. And I did that a lot. And I did that because I was sort of like testing the tarot and seeing if I could actually trust it, believe it, etc. I was very skeptical. I was a very skeptical reader in those early days. So I would say, don't tell me your question. And then I would pull cards, often a Celtic cross, and the center of the Celtic cross would tell me what the question was. And 99% of the time, it felt like it was right on point. Or it was like they might have wanted to ask one question, but this was definitely the more pressing issue to be addressed, is kind of usually how it went down. But what happened was I kept going to all these really intense personal places. And so as a result of that, I started to feel, number one, like maybe they weren't fully prepared for what they were about to be into, like what we were about to cover. And I started to feel a little weird about that like somebody might sit down for a tarot card reading and think I'm going to do something light and fluffy. And then we're getting into like, childhood stuff and like really intense things. And so I started disclaimering. I'd tell my clients, okay, just so you know, this can get really deep, this can get really personal. Like I would definitely make sure we were somewhere private because I made people cry all the time, that kind of thing. And so two things. I would find myself sometimes carrying the heaviness or the energy after a reading. I imagine other readers can relate to this in general. And also, I felt like, what if this person wasn't actually prepared for us to go quite that far? And I was nervous that I was getting too deep for what somebody's real comfort level was. And you can ask somebody's consent, but to me, that only went so far. And sometimes somebody might feel like, oh, sure, no problem. And they don't really know what they're saying yes to. So I'll tell you the visualization. This is really long-winded. I'm sorry. Long-winded answers are my thing. So I came up with this. I don't know why or how, but I came up with this idea that while I was shuffling for my client, while they were shuffling, if I handed them the cards to do some of the shuffling and back and forth, I was visualizing a round room. And I wish I could draw it for you. Maybe I can. Can I draw it for you? I mean, I have a pen. I have a notebook. Hold on. Okay. Do I have I want a scratch pad. Like I don't want to mess up one of my good books. I say that, but I have like 8,000 good books. So like, what is my issue? Here, hold on. I'm just going to like stretch way over. Okay. I've got a journal here. Let's go into a back page. Yeah, sure. There's like a pen test here. Okay. So this is what I would visualize as I'm shuffling. And I still just do this habitually because I've done it for like decades now, but I would visualize this sort of round room. And in the center, there's like a pedestal, I guess you could say. So this would represent the meeting place where we're going to have the reading, the center pedestal. And then on one side of this room, like here-ish, and on the opposite side of this room, like there-ish, is a door. One of these doors is mine. So we'll say this one is mine. It doesn't really matter because it's a round room. So like I'm always got my door behind me and I'm looking toward the other person's door. So I would always imagine myself sort of here. My door is behind me. And then this person here, their door, this is who I'm reading for, their door is here. And so, and I'm okay, keep in mind, I'm an intensely visual person. So this is very easy for me to do. There are a lot of people that this is like terrible advice because visualizing anything is difficult, but for me, visualizing is very easy. So I can do this with my eyes open. I can visualize this visual. Like I know exactly what this room looks like. Like I can't describe it in detail, but like it's very set. But anyways, what's not set is what the other person's door looks like, which is piece one of my intuition. It's very hard to describe this practice, but to say that I would imagine myself sort of coming over here. And my door, by the way, is always open. We'll say it's open like that. Now, I know what my door looks like. I don't need to tell y'all because that's like, it's personal. But across, I would imagine walking over here and looking at this person's door. So the first thing I would do is notice their door. Do I see anything on it? This is just interesting. Most of the time, no. Sometimes, yes. Maybe I'd see a symbol, maybe I'd see an animal, maybe I'd see a carving, maybe I'd see a color, but I would just walk over. Do I see anything about their door? And then as I approach their door, I'll also notice the state of their door. Is it closed? Is it locked? Does it have lots of locks? Is it open? And then I would imagine myself knocking on their door. So this is how I would, on a spiritual level, on a astral level, ask for consent for the reading. This is kind of the punchline I'm getting to. But I would knock on their door, and then I would just notice what happens. I would never see the actual client in the room. Like presumably the client's back in here. But like I never saw the client's in front of me. But what I would see is the state of the door. So sometimes I would walk, and as I'm walking, the door's already open. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. That's very telling. Or maybe as I walk over, the door is like firmly locked. And so I'll have to knock and wait for them to unlock. Do they unlock? I've never had a door stay all the way closed, I don't think, in a reading. But the amount they open the door gives me a lot of information. So I knock, whether or not it was locked and they had to unlock it. How far do they swing the door open? Do they only open it this far, right? Or do they open it this far or all the way, right? That tells me a lot about what they're open to, what they're ready for in that reading. And I would just kind of subtly file this information away in my brain as I'm shuffling the cards. It's like, okay, they're ready, or they're not. Like if the door is quite closed, I'll know, okay, I need to maybe approach much more gently and much more, maybe even more shallowly as I approach the subject. Or if the door is open quite wide, I'd be like, okay, we're good. Now, when I'm doing quick fire readings, like say in my member readings, I don't go through this entire visualization, but I definitely feel it out. And just make sure that I'm like kind of reading the energy, so to speak. But this works for me, even if I'm doing a reading for a client who has just emailed me or ordered a reading online, I still do this when I'm sitting down to do like a full client reading. And that just gives me a bit of a starting place. Number one, what it did is it gave me confidence as a reader to know that I have gotten consent. And I don't know why I do know why I started doing this, but I don't know how the whole thing came to me. It just did. I did it one day and then I never stopped, basically, is kind of how it went. And so that is something that I do really quick when I've got somebody sitting across from me and I'm shuffling for them. Or if I'm, especially if I'm reading for somebody I don't know, or if I'm reading in a public setting, this is really important. Like people that show up for I used to do tea and tarot events, and people would show up for a reading. And sometimes people show up for readings like that, especially if they're really inexpensive and they're sort of like testing a little bit. They're just like, it's kind of a sideshow thing for them, which is completely fine. But if that person sits down and I start reading them to filth from their something that happened when they were 13, they're not prepared for that. They're not coming for that. And so that consent thing gave me sort of a starting place to go, okay, I kind of know what they're open to. I kind of know what they're prepped for. And I also have to listen to what they tell me and read their energy in real time to also get that information. But this just gave me that extra layer of ethical. It made me feel like I was being more ethical with what I was doing with people across the table. Steals yet another idea of Lisa's. That's why we're here. That's absolutely why you're here. Amber says, girl, where you're at is a real place in astral. I've been there on DMT, but been there. That's amazing. Interesting. I have no idea, but yes, I absolutely. How did I get down here? Oh, we were talking about shuffling rituals. So yeah, I don't talk about that a lot because as you can see, it takes a bit to describe and explain, but that's a very common thing that I do that you can pretty much assume I'm doing if I have more than 5 to 10 minutes for a reading. I'm definitely do that. 100%. Bree says, if they don't seem open, do you limit the message from the cards? Kind of. I make sure I'm more cautious to be gentle. I'm more tiptoey on how I lead into a deeper topic. I will never avoid what the cards are telling me. I'm always honest with whatever the cards say to my client, but the way that I approach it will shift based on how open their door is. So if somebody seems quite closed, then I'm not going to go in real hard, right? Which some of you might not realize this, but I have kind of a blunt reading style. I think people don't assume that about me because I can be kind of fluffy bunny girl over here, but my reading style can actually be pretty intense and pretty blunt and pretty call outy at times. And so And so if somebody doesn't seem very open, then what I'll do is if I get a difficult card, I'm not going to be like, yeah, your world's falling apart. And I might say things like that in a reading. So instead, I'll be like, it looks like things are really challenging right now. It looks like things are starting to crumble. Does that resonate with you, or how does that feel for you? But I'll approach it a little more gently. I'll definitely be less like, it's kind of like when you're dealing with somebody shy versus when you're dealing with somebody really confident and outgoing, you're going to speak to them a little bit differently. It's just a natural way that we adjust. So I don't know if limit the message of the cards is quite fair, but I definitely will be more mindful, particularly when going into more sensitive subjects. And I will definitely use more cautious language for sure with somebody that is less open. And if I feel like there's a card that comes through that's really pointing to something really intense, I'll give them a lot of warning, especially in a recorded reading. Like, hey, I feel like I'm getting a pretty intense thing from this card. So I just want to remind you that if you start to feel uncomfortable or anything feels too intense, just pause this video, take a break, go take a walk, or get a beverage for yourself. Come back to this when you're ready. Things like that, I'll be more likely to give them little warnings and disclaimers before we go into deeper places. But I don't not tell them what the cards say. Does it make sense? It's just an approach thing. And if I get the feeling that their door is firmly locked, those situations, I will go into a reading looking for a more shallow message. I will, because it's clear that they're not ready yet. That doesn't happen very often. Usually the door opens a little, but I can usually tell. I've had visualizations where I do this and I can see the door just fling wide open before I even get there. And that's amazing because I'm like, you are here for this. You are ready. And then there's times where I can tell, and it always bears out. It always bears out in a reading that seems helpful for that person in that moment. Yeah, self-doubt is totally normal, Artie, for sure. I love Stardust says, I'll run your name and mental credits in my room scene. That's amazing. I love that so much. Okay. Again, long-winded answers is what we're here for. So yeah. So AC asks, how can traditionally negative tarot cards like the Seven of Swords or the Devil be interpreted in a positive light? Should they be read using their reversed meanings? This is such a great question. And I have like the perfect deck to answer it with because I'm a self-indulgent brat. But let's answer this question using my deck because I took this into account when I created this deck, actually. So, number one, I would say that cards that have a more shadowy meaning are more shadowy by default. So let's start there. And I'll explain how I navigated this actually in the guidebook of my deck. But let's assume that a card like the Tower, the Devil, the Ten of Swords, the Seven of Swords, the Five of Swords, the Five of Pentacles, these cards have a shadowy foundational starting place. They're starting from a more difficult interpretation. So that is their default setting. Whereas a card like the Nine of Cups, the Ten of Cups, the World, these cards have a default setting that is much more positive. So this deck is in order. Mostly because there's my Queen of Earth. Where's my King? They somehow got reversed. Anyway, I keep this one in order. But how I approached this in my guidebook, because I'm not somebody that really reads reversed cards. Sometimes I do, like I play with it, but it's not my home base. So let's look at the card you mentioned, which was the Seven of Swords, because that feels relevant. Okay, there's Seven of Air in my deck, but same. Okay, so here in this card, in the story of this deck, Mystic, who is we're going to be slippy because we're linen, but let me just do this. Okay. So Mystic is on a quest. They're doing a job. They're on a journey, but they get distracted because they see all these little acorns on the ground and Mystic is hungry. So a little bit distracted, and behind the tree here, so there's actually like a rope on the ground. You can see there's a trap ready to be sprung on poor Mystic. So there is a situation you're walking into, maybe unaware, where something shady is going on or something isn't what it seems. Maybe, and sometimes what's happening is we're looking at a situation and we're making assumptions and that's not what's going on. So there's that layer to the Seven of Swords too. But the way I approach this in my guidebook, if we go to the guidebook for the Seven of Air, I will read you verbatim what it says. So I'll read you the story bit. So it says, Mystic knew the castle was just around the next bend. Feeling a burst of optimism and confidence that they had done the right thing, Mystic paused to nibble on some delicate acorns that had fallen from the oak trees that lined the path. Unfortunately, the treats distracted Mystic, who didn't notice the trap that had been set by the dark knights lurking nearby. So my upright, so I do in this guidebook have upright and reversed meanings, right? The upright meaning is you or someone close to you isn't being entirely honest or straightforward. You're not telling the whole story, or you're refusing to see what lies beneath the surface. What truth are you avoiding? And then I have a section that says, right after that, it says, to get back on track. So to get back on track, lift your gaze and look the truth in the face, then deal with it. Okay. But in the reversed, I have it written like this. There are times in life when it's important to carve out the path that is right for you, even if others expect something entirely different. Don't shy away from owning your unmasking. Stand in your truth and your power and boldly face your future. Own this freedom. You've earned it. There's a little bit of more of a rebellious positive interpretation to my reversed interpretation of this card, because its natural default setting is to be more difficult. My to get back on track section shows up in the upright. But if we go to a card that is traditionally positive, just to show you the example, if I go to the 10 of water, for example, which we know is obviously a positive card, the 10 of cups, happy, happy, good times here. If I go to the 10 of water, do y'all want the story? I feel like I'm going to tell you the story anyways. Okay. Mystic remained at the sparkling lilac tree, and the more times they spent at the lilac grove, the more friends they made. Over time, these friends became Mystic's chosen family. The rabbits, the foxes, the bear, the shy little hedgehog, and especially Umbra, the gray wolf. The lilac grove had become a safe place where they fully and finally belonged. In a moment of perfect joy and peace, Mystic finally removed the ruby necklace, hanging it on a nearby branch. Mystic was home. Now, the upright, obviously, there's so much to be grateful for. You've built a life that is full of opportunity, so I won't belabor you with the entire thing. But in the reverse, there's conflict brewing with you and those closest to you. Someone isn't meeting expectations, but those expectations may not be fair or realistic. To get back on track, ask yourself if you're trying too hard to aim for perfect bliss and missing opportunities for imperfect happiness. Recognize what you have before you lose it. So I moved that to get back on track to the reversed meaning piece. And so what I've done with this deck is I've acknowledged that some decks have some cards have a starting point that is more positive, and some have a starting point or default setting that is more shadowy or difficult. And so that to get back on track advice shows up in wherever the difficulty is, upright or reverse. So when you say, how can traditionally negative tarot cards like the Seven of Swords be interpreted, or the Devil be interpreted in a positive light? You then look to, if this card is showing up in a positive way for me, which is outside of its default setting, whether because the card is physically upside down on your table or because you have gotten that, maybe it's in a positive position. Like maybe it's in the, you've done a spread and you get the Devil. Let's actually pull that card. You get the Devil in a blessings position. Okay. So the Devil card sits in a position of blessing as you are doing this reading, and you're like, well, how the heck is the Devil a blessing? Let's go into the guidebook and see. I don't remember what I said at the time, so this is also entertaining for me. I'm sorry if it's like really dumb, but I can't help it. Okay, so here I would look to the Devil, because remember, it's upright. It's a default shadowy. So if I get this in a positive card spread position, like what is today's blessing, I'm going to look to, in my guidebook, I'm going to look to the reverse to look for that interpretation that might flip it a little bit. You're awakening to the reality of your situation, and you're ready to break the cycle. Your self-awareness brings clarity and the promise of freedom. You're ready to leave behind the negative patterns you've been stuck in. There's your blessing. So if you've got a good tarot guidebook to work with that will help you do that, that will help you look for if this card is typically negative, you could, if you have a good guidebook, look for some guidance or inspiration from how that guidebook handles the reversal. Now, not all guidebooks are going to handle reversals the same way. Not all readers handle reversals the same way. So for example, some readers might handle a reversal. The Devil card is always negative no matter what. And they handle a reversal as whether the energy is blocked, whether it's like maybe emphasized as extra negative. So what you've got to decide as a tarot reader is, how are you going to approach the card's default setting, its default interpretation, and how you will look at it differently in the cases where it's clear it is meant to be positive, either because of the spread position, the question you asked. So if you ask a question like, what is going to get me out of this funk I'm in? And you pull the Devil, you're frustrated because you're like, well, that's a negative card. So every single person who works with cards has to, for themselves, determine, how am I going to handle that? Whether or not I read with physically reversed cards, how am I going to handle it when I ask a question or have a spread position that implies this is a positive card for me? but I pull a negative card. And so that's why I'm sharing my method, because that's what works for me. So what works for me is to look to instead, kind of, let's go back to Justin's earlier question about how do we not read predictably? How do we keep our power, et cetera, et cetera? We can ask ourselves that question. Well, if this is a blessing, you just literally ask yourself the question, how could the devil card be a blessing? How could negative patterns be a blessing? Oh, maybe it's not about the pattern. Maybe it's about the fact that I'm finally breaking free of the pattern. And you have this dialogue with yourself where you explore, what is it telling me? And you can do that organically, or you can make a little bit of a rule for yourself for how you're going to handle it. So in my case, if I get a traditionally negative card in a positive position, for me, I would go to my own personal reversed interpretation, such as it is, and look at the more positive way to look at that card. But sometimes not. Like sometimes the tower is the tower is the tower, and that's an intuitive decision. Like maybe, yes, the tower is still coming down and that sucks, but maybe the blessing is that it's going to be good for me in the long run. You know what I mean? So some of this, again, comes back to self-trust, following what you feel in your body, in your gut, in your mind, or in your heart as you're working with your cards. What does this feel like it's telling me? And trusting the answer. Because I think a lot of times we're looking for a rule set that will 100% be so crystal clear without any of our own input. And card reading always involves, to some degree or another, our own input. But when I'm reading for myself, I like working with the guidebooks. So naturally, when I made my own deck, I built the guidebook to function the way that I would want it to function if I pulled that card in that context. So for me, Unicorn's Journey Tarot does that exactly the way I need it to do it. And obviously, because I got to write it and create it, it does that perfectly for me. But it's going to depend. And not all guidebooks will follow that formula. So it's also maybe considering what deck you're working with. If you do work with guidebooks, make sure the guidebook's in alignment with the way you want to work with the card, or don't work with the guidebook if it's not in alignment with you, that kind of thing. Yeah, Sean says, I think the deeper your understanding of the cards becomes, it becomes natural and organic to do this. I agree. It's easier as you get more comfortable with your relationship with what every single card means. It's why I'm so passionate about building your own bond with the card and understanding for yourself what it's going to mean. Because that's the whole point behind this, was like, I wanted to guide people toward building their own personal relationship with the meaning of every card. Because once it's personal for you, once you know for yourself what that card's going to mean, it will open up so many possibilities for how you read. It will give you such a strong jumping off point. Because if you're just reading it the way you've been taught to read it, that's valid and it works. But it's missing that personal layer where it's going to like feel true for you. Yeah, AC says that was exactly the type of situation I was asking this question for, having a negative card in a blessing type of position. That is so helpful. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, so for sure. And y'all, I love when people in the chat also chime in. Don't be afraid. While I'm not the only tarot person here. So if somebody asks a question and you want to share your thoughts as well, or what works for you in the comments, please do. Whether you're watching this back or you're in the chat right now, please feel free to share what works for you, because we can all share our wisdom with each other. Amber says, early on, I always used reversals and read the cards around them as the wisdom to be able to turn the reversal card and unblock that energy. Now it's intuitive for me and I don't shuffle in reversals. Yes, this is my challenge, because I tend to enjoy reversals occasionally if I'm working with like a really classic deck, like a Rider-Waite-Smith, like an actual like Rider-Waite-Smith, to give myself something else, because the Rider-Waite-Smith is so baked into my psyche at this point. I feel like that this feels like I'm missing a layer to read with. I've talked about that before. But for the most part, the organic feel of, is this telling me something positive or negative, comes up for me intuitively throughout the read. Okay, Tyler, I've added your question to my list. Okay. So next up, we have the Forgotten Storytellers. Question: I'm very new to tarot and find myself stuck in the study phase. I totally feel this. How do you go about designing a tarot practice, and how do you figure out what questions to ask? This is such a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. Well, for starters, I love, hold on, I'm going to just babble with my face for a minute, because my arm is distracting me. I love the like chewy, juicy deep dive of learning stuff. I am such a learning addict. I love it. I love it. I love, just give me more. Let me stuff more in there. I love that feeling. And it can be a place where we get stuck because we feel like we're just constantly taking in and we're not outputting anything. And it's important to find that balance for sure between the input and the output, which is language I actually got from Benabel Went from this random video that she shared on her Facebook or something a while back. Anyways, it just stuck with me. She was talking about output versus input and how she intentionally takes time to input in her day sometimes rather than only output, which I thought was a beautiful way to discuss balance and productivity and such. But that's a sidebar. Here we are for another sidebar. I think part of what happens when we get stuck in the study phase is that we feel like we're never going to have enough. We're never going to be done. We're never going to hit a point where we just like know all the things that there are to know about tarot and are therefore prepped and ready to go hit the ground running. It's never going to happen. I can tell you it's never going to happen because I'm like 30 years in now almost. Yeah. God, I'm getting old. I'm like 30 years in almost. And I feel like I am constantly still hungering for more. I'm constantly still, I just got a book I'll be talking about in my next recent deck roundup where I am like, yes, give me this. This is new. This is different. This is meaty. I want to chew on this. I don't know why it's always like a food reference, but here we are. But like that is very intoxicating. But it can also be a thing where we never quite feel prepared to take that next step because we're like, well, there's always more. I don't know everything yet. You're never going to. So like at some point you just got to like leap off the cliff and start doing it. So yes, I wanted to just validate the experience of being stuck in the study phase because I so get it. But when you talk about designing a tarot practice, number one, I want to point out the beauty of that phrasing because I think that's really important. You are designing a tarot practice or a card practice for yourself based on your personal needs and what you want to get out of it. So a lot of that is going to begin with, why are you interested in working with cards in the first place? And answering that question for yourself. Why are you interested? Are you interested because you like the psychological deep dive into yourself and you want to have a practice that helps you to reflect your truth back to you, helps you to see yourself, helps you to understand yourself, helps you to maybe unpack your shadows, helps you to be more like brutally honest with yourself, hold yourself accountable, do the difficult work, this kind of stuff, right? Is that what you're drawn to? Or are you drawn to seeing the cards as like a deck of advice givers, something that can guide you and help direct your choices and your actions? Is your work going to be more focused internally in unpacking self and understanding self, which is a lot of where my personal work sits? Or is your work more focused on helping to provide that sort of external guidance and validation you need to make decisions and move through your life? Because that is going to be different. How you're going to design a tarot practice for yourself is going to be different depending on those things. Also, there is ways to design a tarot practice that integrates with study. So if you're like, okay, I've been studying, now I want to really know the cards. Well, then you might want to have sort of a practice that you build that is designed to layer or intertwine study with practice. So for example, it's really common advice to once you've done taking in all this book knowledge or video knowledge or course knowledge or whatever it is you've been doing to acquire knowledge about how to read the cards, it's really common advice to start like a card a day practice. Now that might be a card in the beginning of the day to say like, what's my advice for the day? How should I move through my day today? Or what's the energy? Like taking the temperature of the day. And then paying attention throughout the day to how that card showed up. That can help to build a understanding of the card that goes a little deeper than just that book input knowledge, right? So that could be one thing you could try. I get bored with that real freaking easy, to be honest, but a lot of people find that very, very, very effective. So if you're still kind of in study mode and you want to kind of just tiptoe, then see your practice first as a study aid to kind of like bridge the gap from study mode to practice mode. And then the other way to do a daily card, as Amber just pointed out, is a nighttime reflection card, which I actually find as a brand new reader or brand new tarot person, or when you're newer or beginner, I think that's actually oftentimes a lot easier for people. You sit down at the end of your day, you're getting ready to go to bed, you pull a card and you go, how did this card apply to everything I experienced today? Where did this card's energy show up? I have a practice very much like that I still do today, that has become deeply spiritual and personal and meaningful for me because I pull a card and I'm like, where was I supported today? Where was I held today? Where was I being pointed to the truth today? Maybe I missed it and I want to know, did I miss it? Did I see it? Was I feeling it at the time? So that's a very smart sort of spiritual take on that concept. But there's also just the general, like, how did this energy show up? And doing it in a reflective way feels very accessible. So that's another study aid style practice you could build in for yourself. But when you decide what it is that you're going to design for your tarot practice, the first thing to ask yourself is what the point of the practice is. Do you want, like I said, you have to go back to yourself and ask yourself that question. What do I want out of working with cards? If you want to dive into those deep, shadowy places, then you probably should build some sort of practice or spread or ritual that leads you in that direction. If you want it to be the study thing, then the one I just suggested might be really good, the morning or bedtime reflection type poll. If you want to have advice that's going to guide your day, then that's the kind of question you're going to ask. So first answering what the purpose is will lead you to what the next step is. So you've decided, okay, actually I do want that. I want the guidance style. That feels right to me. That feels like what I'm interested in with the cards. So you go, what's a good question I can ask that will help me get that kind of information from my cards, whether it's a 1 card or a 3 card. So my energy obstacle advice sort of daily draw is that way. It's kind of like, what do I need to know about the energy of the day? What might I bump into? So what should I prepare myself for? That might be a bit of a hiccup so that I'm not caught off guard. And then what's my advice for the day? So I have a daily spread that works really well for me. That's 3 cards. That might be a bit much to start with. You might want to pick a question that you can answer with 1 card, just so it's less complicated. So you might say, what is my daily advice? And then you pull a card for advice. Now, if you're working on self-awareness work, if you're working on diving deep within, if you're wanting to like call yourself out or hold yourself accountable, then you might ask yourself a question like, what do I need to be aware of about my habits or behavior today? What should I look out for? Or what should I'm trying to think of a good way to word this question. Like, how can I avoid getting in my own way today? Or where might I stumble if I'm not present today? And then you can pull a card and that card can tell you where you might be likely to misstep in your day. And then you can bring that presence and that awareness to yourself if you're doing that kind of work. Maybe you're working on building a gratitude practice. And so you might pull a card in the beginning of the day. What should I be looking to be grateful for today? What opportunities for gratitude do I have coming up? Or how can I focus in on the blessings in my life today? So you can formulate a question for a daily draw that is in alignment with your other personal or spiritual goals. And that's a great place to start because then you've personalized it to yourself. And I would say that when you're first making the leap from input, so taking in all this information and studying, to output, like trying to actually put something into practice, you've got to start with something that matters to you, or you're not going to want to bother doing it, to be honest. Is it in alignment with the goals? And then build something around that, but start with one simple practice, something you can do in like 5 minutes or less, because then it's accessible. It's not going to feel like work. It's not going to feel like this big setup process. You can just integrate it into your day. And if you want to make it a habit, then tie it to another habit. Every day when I get my coffee, I'm going to pull a single card. And then and then you have your question you ask for yourself. The second thing I will say with this, and I feel like I've gone way down deep in this one, but the second thing I will say is always, always, always check in with your practices. Don't just assume that just because you've decided this is what you're going to do, that you're stuck with it forever. You might do it for like 3-4 days and be like, wow, this is not really what I want. Change it often. Or if it's working, use it for years, but give yourself that permission to ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this feeling right? Because sometimes having a habit or a practice that is always the same, even when it feels a little dull, is exactly what you need, because you need that touch point. Even when it's a little boring, you need that touch point, that consistency to give you an anchor in your practice. But sometimes, if you're like me, sometimes if it starts to feel too automatic, too autopilot-y, too robotic, I find myself needing to change it because I've stopped getting something nourishing out of it. I've stopped getting that meat out of it. It started to feel flat. And for me, when my practice starts to feel flat, I have to change it, or I will find myself sort of disenchanted with my practices in general. So I know that was a long answer to a relatively short question, but I hope that it gave some thoughts on how you can personally design it. But as far as like it always starts with what is your goal for your practice, and then build from there. Oh, good. Yes, you're welcome. I'm normally a person who's very good at being okay with not knowing everything, but tarot is different for some reason. It can bring up so much self-consciousness. Like, am I allowed? do I have enough to go to the next step? Let me tell you, the reason that Peggy and I were so excited about creating Sassy Dragons is because we wanted something where people didn't have to feel like they needed to learn a bunch of stuff to just build a practice or use their cards. So if the information's right there, and it usually is, because you definitely have a deck with a guidebook. I'm confident you have a deck with a guidebook. You can, before learning anything, pull a card for yourself, ask a question, and just read the guidebook and see how it answers your question. That's a great place to start with a practice without any study, without any knowledge. And then you can decide. I'm a big fan of actually, maybe this might be a hot take. I don't know. But I'm actually a big fan of working with your cards before you worry too much about studying. Truly. Because what if you don't like it? What if you like start a daily card practice or something and you're like, actually, this thing is not for me. And you've invested hours and hundreds of hours for most of us into studying. And then you're like, actually, this doesn't really fit my life. Maybe like find out if you like it. Maybe find out if it fits into your life and then decide how deep you want to take it. So I'm a big fan of like experience and play and practice and exploring before you commit to like a big long like journey of study. Anyway, yeah. I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. I did snag one or two while I was answering that one, so I think I'm good. Loving all of the participation in chat, y'all. Yeah, Justin, this is a very good point. In my opinion, the best way to learn something and to become an expert at it is to teach it to somebody else. That's very true. I learn a lot just by like answering questions. In a lot of ways, actually, the initial live streams, in fact, I don't know if I mentioned this last time we did one of these, but the initial, let me just show y'all. It's multimedia time again. Where's my view? There it is. The initial time we did these tarot FAQs, where is it? With when I was doing my tarot with trading wheels, I had a couple of these style live streams. That's where the idea for these came from. And a lot of the questions that y'all asked back then formed the basis for this chapter in my book called Don't Let These Mix-Ups Trip You Up, where we talk about things like cards that are frequently confused, how they seem the same, but they're different, right? So this came up because of answering questions in this kind of stuff. So like, it's just kind of cool that like, you never know where something's going to lead you, which is pretty cool. Anyway. Okay. So next up we have Twirl with Tarot question. Is my coffee? Oh my God, my coffee's running out of battery. I've been talking so long. How do I bond deeper with my deck? Sorry. Twirl with Tarot asks, how do I bond deeper with my deck beyond the initial phase? I always find myself in the stalemate after the initial bond. I can't seem to make a deck my own. This is such a great question. Somebody said, uh-oh. Why uh-oh? Oh, are we talking about a book? Are we influencing each other to shop in the chat? Is that what's happening? Oh, I didn't mean to take the question down. Okay. So where do I want to start? Okay. So when I was new to tarot, everybody talked about how the way to bond with the deck is like carry it with you everywhere and like put it under your pillow and stuff. And like I'll be honest, that never really was my thing. Like sometimes I will pick a crystal and it will live with the deck. In fact, my first edition Mons Tarot has a special crystal that still lives in the box. My experience is, for me, two things. Walkthroughs. This is going to be, I have this exercise for you. Don't worry. Walkthroughs and really just using it for everything for a period of time. That means not giving myself permission to reach for something else because it's easier and I know it better, right? So let me talk about walkthroughs first. So obviously I make content on YouTube, so that makes this pretty easy. If I really want to bond with the deck and I'm just it's not happening, right? Then I'll make a walkthrough video. In fact, in the beginning, when I first started my channel, I walked through every single deck I brought in and did a video. Even if the video didn't make it onto the channel, I did a video for every single deck I got. And what that did for me is it made me sit and pause and slow down with every single card and really look at it and consider what I see in it. I would look for symbols. I would look for how it lines up with my understanding of what that card means. And I promise I'm not trying to plug, but Twirl, do you have Unlocking the Tarot? Because I have another thought as well that I want to share with you about. That's a great bonding exercise if you do. Anyway, so I would walk through the cards. Now, obviously, if you don't have a YouTube channel or if you're the type of person that doesn't naturally kind of go in and like really like pause and think about whatever, then this can be a little bit challenging. But here's what I would challenge you to do. Get your new deck first of all. Okay, good. You do have it. Okay, so I'll talk about that next thing in a minute. So get your new deck in order, because here's what happens. We get a new deck and we're all excited. I know we've all done this. Tell me you haven't, right? You get a new deck, you get it out of its plastic, and you start like you do this business, right? You're like, oh my God, oh, that's so cute. Oh, cool. Oh, cute. Oh my God. This is what we do, right? It's really hard because we've got that new pretty excitement going on to slow down. So there's two ways you can do a walkthrough for yourself. You don't have to do this on camera. You don't have to talk it out loud, but you get out a piece of paper, or if you're faster at typing, you get out your laptop or your whatever, and you pull the cards in order and you pause on each card. What do you notice? What jumps out at you? Oh, interesting. So like here's what I noticed in Justice. There's a ladybug on the card, and it's got all of these little, hello, can you please focus on the ladybug? Hello? Okay, my camera's not cooperating. Why? Can you not? Fine. Anyways, there's a spiky ladybug here that's like all armored. Like it has little spikes all over it. So I noticed that. So I might write that down. Oh, on the Justice card, there's a spiky ladybug. And I might write what I think that might mean or symbolize. And then go to the next one. Oh, on the 7 of Wands, there's like it looks like maybe a mosquito that might be bugging this guy. What does that mean? And like I might point out, oh man, this 7 of Wands looks a lot like the 9 of Wands, which is something I always look for because it annoys me when it happens. Or I might look at this and go, oh my God, there's a unibunny? Question mark? I have no idea what creature that is, but it's got a unicorn horn. And there's also a flying bunny over here. So like there's things happening with the Queen of Pentacles. Like she's got stuff going on. Or I might be like, oh, the 3 of Swords is crying. How do I feel about that? Do I like that? Or do I not like that? Because I don't like to see too much emotion in my 3 of Swords. Maybe I don't like that. Maybe it feels too emotional for an air card. How do I think about that? So you can go through and basically do a walkthrough for yourself where you go through each card. And you might not even write anything down. You might just sit and consider, how does this feel? And another way you can do a walkthrough for yourself is to put the deck in order next to a Rider-Waite-Smith. So you pull out your favorite, assuming that you understand these images and you know these images very well, or you pull a deck you do know really well. For me, in the beginning, that was actually the Osho Zen Tarot I did this with. But you could do it with whatever deck you know really, really well. And you get your new deck side by side. And this is really great to do on your own because it requires less effort, I think, to compare the new deck to a deck you know really well than it is to sort of just look only at the new deck and figure out what jumps out at you. This can actually be much easier. So you just flip through and you go, oh, this is really different. And here's how it's different. And here's what I do and don't like about that. And you go through and you consider, oh, look, they both have the dark and the light. Like you can start to compare symbols. You might notice what jumps out at you. And so you build a relationship that way by noticing where it differs and similars. It similars and differs. How it's the same and different as a deck you do know really well. Now, if you have Unlocking the Tarot and you've gone through and created a set of your own keywords, or if you've done Tarot with Training Wheels, which is the less in-depth version of Unlocking the Tarot, okay? If you've done Tarot with Training Wheels, or if you happen to be one of the few people who have taken my Tarot Bootcamp for Beginners course that I have on my website, which, let me show you. Actually. Because some of you have done it. Where's my bootcamp deck? Hello? It's back in here somewhere. Is it there? Oh, there it is. I see it. I'm bringing you with me so y'all can hear me. You just can't see me. It should be. Yes, here it is. Okay. So those of you who have done the boot camp or who have done Tarot with Training Wheels will have a marked up deck ideally to work with. So Tarot, Unlocking the Tarot, this is my unlocked deck. So this uses my keywords from the Unlocking the Tarot. Now maybe like Danny, she did her Unlocking the Tarot with the Heartwood Tarot, I believe, by Three Trees Tarot. So now when you're comparing side by side, so let me just grab the 3 of Water so you can see. Now, when you're comparing side by side, you're comparing not only to the imagery that you're looking at, but you're also comparing to the keyword. So you're going, and I talk about this actually in Unlocking the Tarot, is, okay, so here we have the 3 of Cups, and my word here on the artwork is support. And here we have the 3 of Water. And so I can ask myself, how does this card show that concept? How does it illustrate that concept? Do I see support in this card? Because this is my keyword. So if I want this deck to feel like me, I have to find my meaning in this card. I don't have to, but it's helpful too. So that's one way. If you've done the course, the Tarot Bootcamp course, then you get to go even deeper. Let me just pull this out like this. Okay. So here's my bootcamp deck, which is out of order because I've totally shuffled it because I've worked with it. Okay, let me find the Fool. Fine, I'll just use the High Priestess. Okay. Yeah, okay. So the bootcamp course uses all kinds of things, numerology, color, other things, and we build actually quite a bit of associations with each card, not just the one keyword. So for example, in High Priestess, here's my bootcamp card. So I have the color purple, which of course I see here, which makes me happy. I have the Secret Keeper, intuition, mystery, inner voice, higher power, subconscious information, and choice for the number 2. So I have all of this information and I can go through this deck in order next to my bootcamp deck, which has all of these associations, and do that same exercise. So the Unlocking the Tarot or Tarot with Trading Wheels exercise is kind of the starting point for this. And then you can go even deeper, even deeper, even deeper, depending on how much you have to compare to. So those are some great bonding exercises in general. As far as like getting to know the images, finding out if they work for you, this kind of thing. So the last thing that I mentioned as far as how you can bond with the deck is to make yourself use it. Like, so what I mean by that is I'll pick a deck. I do this actually all the time. I was just working with Lisa Hunt's Fairy Tale Tarot, and I talked about this in my monthly deck reviews. I worked with the Fairy Tale Tarot through most of the month of April, almost exclusively. I think it was April. So every day for my energy obstacle advice reading, I worked with the Fairy Tale Tarot. And what I did, because I really wanted to bond with the stories, is I would pull either 1 card, 2 cards, or 3 cards in the Fairy Tale Tarot, which I'm not showing right now. This is just because I like to have props. And I would pull the card and I would read the story. If I didn't know the fairy tale, I would read the fairy tale in the bigger expanded book I happen to have for the Fairy Tale Tarot. I'd read that story. Now, if you don't have the old book for that, you could just like Google the story or whatever. I would read it. So I would familiarize myself with the story that's being illustrated. And then I would do the reading and apply it to my day or whatever, my energy obstacle advice reading. I found that got a little intense. So I had to switch back to like 1 card if I didn't know the story. And so, but I worked with it for everything. If I had a question, I pulled that deck. If I wanted to do a daily reading, I pulled that deck. I call them kind of like deep dive. I tend to deep dive into a deck. I work with it for an extended period. In fact, you can actually go onto my channel. If you look, I haven't done one in a long time, but I had a series I did for a little bit called A Month With, and I did like a month with this deck, a month with that deck. And they were kind of like my own personal deck studies kind of thing. Like I spent an entire month working with mostly just that deck, and I shared my experience in those videos. So if you go look, if you just search maybe A Month With, I don't know if I have a playlist for them, but they might be under my deep dives. There's only a couple. I don't think I stuck with that series for very long, but yeah, if you go look at that, you can see kind of how that process went for me. But that's another thing that you can do if you're trying to bond with a deck. So I know that was a lot. If anybody else has feedback on how you've enjoyed bonding with a deck or making it yours, throw it in the chat, obviously. I always end up with decks just everywhere. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. Let's see where we're at. And I don't know if I missed any questions. Oh, you've seen them. Month with Mystical Moments. It's great. Yeah. So, and that's one of the decks I'm actually the most bonded with, which is funny. There's a correlation when we really take the time. And it's hard because you're like, well, I've got all these decks. I want to use them. I had to give myself permission. I used to rotate my decks weekly. I still do most of the time. But if I've got a deck I'm trying to bond with, I give myself permission to put everything else on hold. And I spend a month with that deck. And usually by the end of that month, I'm pretty good. Now, we also have in the membership, we do a deck study club. So I end up spending 2 months. We do 2-month studies. I end up spending 2 months with the deck I'm studying. And that I do, depending on how deep I need to go, it will become the primary deck I work with, or I will layer it with other things I'm working with, depending. But if it's a deck I'm real motivated to go super deep with, I'll use it almost exclusively or exclusively during our study period. And I've done that too. So those studies are also really helpful because we're really taking the time to read the guidebook, which is also helpful if you're trying to bond. We're also taking the time to read the guidebook. We're also taking the time to study. I'll eventually move on from this question, I swear. Anyways, again, hope that was helpful. Let's see what else we have on the list, and I'm going to see if I missed any questions. Yes, Michelle says that's what I'm doing with your book, Keywords in This Might Hurt. I'm making that my personal reference deck like you've done with the RWS. Yes, exactly. And it's really handy to have a deck that you have marked up to be your what you believe makes sense for the interpretation of every card. It absolutely becomes this thing. I actually recommend in both Tarot with Training Wheels and with Unlocking the Tarot that once you have, and in the Tarot Bootcamp course, once you have that reference deck, pull it out when you're watching your next deck walkthrough and have yours in order and follow along with the walkthrough and do that compare contrast. That's an excellent way to check. Anyways, yes. You're welcome, Twirl. Okay. So next up we have Crystal. Oh, thank you so much. I do have a question. How can I read a challenging or negative card in an outcome or future spread position? So I feel like to some degree, we kind of addressed this in the earlier question we answered about generally reading negative cards in more positive ways, but sometimes future outcome isn't always positive, right? So how do we interpret that? Sorry, all my coffee's going cold. I'm trying to finish it. Okay. I'm trying to think of I guess I'll just grab Monstero again. Let's do, I don't do a lot of like straight future position, but I want to answer this card or this question to the best of my ability. So let's say we'll do past, present, future, because that's such a common 3-card spread that so many of us learn to do, right? So let's do a past, present, future and see what comes up. Now, for me, keep in mind that my personal belief structure is that when I'm reading a future or outcome position, I'm reading it more as trajectory, outcome, like which way am I headed toward if I don't make any changes? Or in the case of like a Celtic cross, instead of outcome, I've renamed the position key to the outcome. So it's not the outcome, it's how do I get to that, to where I need to get kind of thing. Okay, so let's say past, present, future. So we have 7 of Wands, 3 of Swords, 5 of Wands. Okay, all right, it's challenging all the way around. What I'm going to do, just for the sake of the exercise, is move the 3 of Swords to the future, just to make it extra obvious that it's a more negative or difficult card. Okay, so it's going to depend on the context of the cards, but let's take a look at it. So I see, if I'm going to really just bring it down to the basics, right? In the past, we have the 7 of Wands. So some defensiveness, perhaps, some having to maybe guard ourselves against an onslaught of other people's opinions or words or thoughts. And then in the present, we have this sort of kind of conflict. It might not be an outwardly negative conflict, but certainly we're butting heads with somebody or something. We're in a situation where it's very we're not getting anywhere. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's a lot of opinions flying around. Again, here, there's a lot of opinions, but you were having to assert yourself in the past. Here, you're in it, still trying to figure out how to find your voice kind of thing. And then the future is the 3 of Swords. Now, the 3 of Swords is a card that I typically associate with reckonings and lessons learned, often the hard way, and integrating past experiences and learning from them. So how do we see that in a future position? Well, to me, I would read this as I may not get what I want out of this exchange. This may not go my way. It's looking like if things keep on the way that they're keeping on, which is not great, there's a little bit of conflict and push-pull. If that continues, it's probably going to end in some disappointment for me. But the 3 of Swords is also a card about growing and learning from that experience. Okay, this might not go the way that I want it to go. But if that's the case, if it doesn't go the way that I want it to go, yes, I'm going to be disappointed. But if that's how it plays out, there's going to be an opportunity for me to learn and grow from that experience, which obviously it would be nicer to learn and grow from more positive experiences. But there's going to be an opportunity for me to spring back from this as long as I am willing to integrate the lessons of the experience. So I think that's one way to look at it. So let's grab a different negative, again, a different three card spread, and pull. We'll use the 5 of Swords. I'm just pulling cards off the bottom here. So now we have the 5 of Swords as our future. So we have 4 of Cups, Wheel of Fortune, 5 of Swords. So let's look at this one. So 4 of Cups is a card. So again, we're looking at this past, present, future. So 4 of Cups in the past. Now, to me, this card can indicate some emotional stability. Like things are good, but we're not necessarily, we're stable, but we risk stagnation. We risk sort of being a little bit stuck, a little bit complacent, a little bit unaware of new blessings, maybe lacking in gratitude. Maybe we don't really see the good. We're kind of like, we're like, things are good, but we're not necessarily feeling particularly inspired or particularly like moved towards more positive, right? So maybe that's the case. And then in the Wheel of Fortune, though, in the present, we're seeing a shift. There's an energetic shift. So yeah, things have been stable, but now they're changing. And change is something that we can be really resistant to. Well, the Five of Swords sits here in the future outcome position with his titter tee hee, I got all the swords, little jerky moment he's having here. And you're like, okay, is this going to be me? Am I going to be the one that is like lording it over somebody that like, am I going to be this righteously, what is it called? Is it righteous indignation? I'm thinking like soapboxing or like lording it over somebody that I've won. Am I going to be so focused on winning something? And because this started off with an emotional card, like the Cups card, I might go, maybe there's a little bit of change brewing in a relationship. Maybe there's a little bit of change like happening right now in maybe a friendship you have. Maybe this is warning you. This could be a warning, this future position. Maybe this is warning you that if you're more focused on winning than resolving the problem, that you're going to lose the relationship. You might win the argument, but you might lose the relationship or that friendship over it. So this could be a bit of a warning of like, if you let this go in a particular way, if you're so resistant to change and you're so focused on winning that you can't hear the other person, that's how it could go. So it's one way to look at it, right? So you can look at it kind of like as a bit of a warning, like, hey, if you keep on the way you're keeping on, this is where you're headed. So maybe you need to make a change. And so I think the anchor of the answer to your question, Crystal, is, are you looking at future as fixed and unchangeable? Or are you looking at the future as a prediction, kind of like a weather forecast or a, here's the horse I think is going to win that race kind of thing. If you're looking at it as a prediction, as a forecast, as a trajectory, then it's subject to change. So if you see something negative in the outcome and you don't want that outcome, well, then you better make some changes in the present. You maybe need to look at your behavior and your choices right now so you can shift this trajectory. And you can even ask that question. This is a great exercise, by the way, y'all. Let me zoom this out a little bit so I can show you this. Okay. So you're like, you know what? I just got a card I don't really like in the outcome position of a reading I've just done. Okay. So build on it. Instead of sitting there and going, well, I guess that's how it's going to go, ask yourself, how can I change that? So shuffle your cards. You've just gotten the Five of Swords as the outcome. You've asked a question about your relationship and you've got Four of Cups, Wheel of Fortune, Five of Swords. And we've explored what that could mean. Somebody's going to be so focused on winning that the relationship may be damaged. We may even lose the relationship. Well, I don't want that. Okay, then shuffle your freaking cards and ask the question. How can I change that trajectory? How can I change that? What do I need to do in the present? What action should I take? Let's ask that question. What action can I take to create a different outcome for myself? So that's the first card we're going to pull. What action can I take to create a different outcome for myself? So you pull the card. Six of Swords. Interesting. Now I look at that and I go, somebody needs to let something go, because what's happening in the Six of Swords, yes, we're moving from rough waters to smooth, but we're bringing the swords with ourselves. Are we setting ourselves up for more unhappiness in the future because we're dragging all this baggage with us? We need to move on. We need to move forward. We need to learn how to let something go. Maybe we keep picking at the past and that's creating conflict in the relationship. Okay. If I do this, so this is the follow-up question. Don't be afraid to have a conversation with your cards, y'all. Don't be afraid to take a spread and build on it because you need more information, right? So now you've asked, what do I need to do to change the outcome? Well, this. Okay, I need to start to let things go. I need to be better at moving towards smooth waters, putting rough times behind me. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question. If I do that, if I am better at letting things go, how does that change my trajectory and what direction does it take me? Like, so I'm keeping it kind of open. You see how I worded that? I'm not saying what's the outcome. I'm saying, what's that going to shift? What's that going to change? Where's that going to take me? Like, what's that looking like? I'm keeping it kind of open. You can reword your question as you're shuffling. And I get the Seven of Swords. Oh, whoa, that's not expected, right? Okay, well, now we've gone from Five of Swords to now I'm letting stuff go. And now the Seven of Swords shows somebody getting away with something. Okay, wait, I might be in a bit of a rock hard place situation. What's happening here? If I say something, I'm creating conflict, right? I'm just picking at the past. But if I just completely let it go, then maybe the other person is taking advantage. Maybe they're getting away with something because now I'm not speaking up. Well, that's shitty. Okay, so I'm going to shuffle some more and I'm going to go, okay, So now I'm going to say, well, clearly just completely letting it go and leaving the past behind isn't the only solution. So there's something here going on. Yeah, I know, 5, 6, and 7 of swords. I know. So it's like, okay, there's something going on here. This may be too extreme. I might be overcorrecting with the 6 of swords. So yes, maybe I need to not be picking at things, but I obviously can't let it go completely, or this other person's behavior isn't going to change, or the problem isn't going to be solved. So how do I find the middle path between being so focused on winning the argument that I cause destruction in the relationship and letting everything go to the point where I'm causing destruction in the relationship in a different way? So it's like, okay, well, I need to clearly find the middle path between these two things. So what is the middle path? What is going to, I just threw half my cards on the floor, but we're going to pick those up in a second. I'm going to shuffle what's left. Okay. What's that middle path? And look at how beautiful an answer I just got. The 3 of Pentacles. I need to stop worrying about whether it's not just me that has to fix this problem. It is not my job to make it all better, to automatically solve the problem in this relationship. I need to work with the other person. We need to come together and create a plan together. How are we together going to address this issue? How are we together going to solve this problem? It has now got to be, instead of me against you and one of us trying to solve it all on our own, we need to come together and it's you and me against the problem. Not me against you, not you against me. That's my answer. So now I've taken a 3-card reading that felt discouraging and disempowering, and I've had a conversation with my cards that has gotten me to tangible advice that I can actually integrate and I can actually take to the table and get an outcome that I am happier with. Because instead of just seeing this as an edict that has been passed to me from my cards, like, this is what's going to happen, don't bother trying or doing anything different, I have allowed myself to engage and to play into this experience and be an active participant in it. Does that make sense? Now I need to find my cards that are all on the ground. just a moment. So yeah, really good question so far, y'all. Loving it. Okay, so I'm also kind of in the mood to just talk, which helps a lot. Okay. So I hope that answers your question, Crystal, and gives you some stuff that you can focus on. But a lot of it is how you choose to take that answer, what you choose to do with it, and where you go forward from it that's going to matter. But again, I think a lot of times we think that once we lay the cards, that's it. We're done. We're not allowed to continue. And this is the point of clarifiers. This is why some people like to pull in an oracle deck and pull an additional message. Or in this case, if you have an inconclusive answer to the question, there's no reason you can't ask a follow-up question. Now, what you shouldn't do is go, let's say the cards have just like read you to filth and told you need to get your shit together, right? Don't then just take that and go, well, how can I avoid doing the work? I don't want to do the work, right? Because you're not going to get answers you like, number one. Number 2, you're going to be defeating the purpose. If you've gotten an answer that is useful, let yourself sit with that answer. But if you're left confused or disempowered, or you feel like defeated in some way, then you're not at the end. You need more information. So continue the conversation and see where it takes you. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay. Let's see. Do I have any coffee left in here? The tiniest bit. Okay. Oh, and it's cold because I let my coffee battery die, my mug battery die. Okay. Okay, I've got, we actually got a good number. I am just talking on all these. Okay, Isabel, do you combine Oracle and Tarot for client reading? Yes, I do. But I actually kind of tend to do it backwards. Let me grab a fun Oracle deck. Ooh, let's grab this one because this is about to come out as one cohesive deck. How exciting. What can I pair it with? No, that's not the view I wanted. I want this view. Okay, so I grabbed the Oracle of Oddities, 1, 2, and 3 that are combined. Let me grab something fun to go with it though, because that's like, I'm not pairing that with Mons Tarot. What should I pair it with? What will I grab? You know what? I'm going to grab Heartwood. Don't mind me. Sorry, Shayla. I disturbed my dog and she's like, how dare you? I'm so sorry. She's like, she's in her little bed at the base of that wall of decks. But okay, so I grabbed Heartwood. Okay. I don't know why, but I felt like they might go cute together. I've never paired them before, but let's just show. So in a client reading or in a reading for other people, And honestly, for myself, a lot of the times I will pull the oracle first, usually. I want to make sure I'm not missing questions. Okay, so I've got the Oracle of Oddities. I'm going to just pull it. So typically what I will do is, let's say I'm reading for we'll say I'm reading for myself. Let's say I'm reading for myself and I'm reading for a general check-in about my work. Watch this just read me to fill. Just wait. Every time I do that and I pick a question for myself, it always goes like really intense. But let's just see. So I'm reading about my work. And when I say work, I'm usually not referring to my day job. I'm usually referring to my like tarot creations and all kinds of other stuff. So I'm just going to do a general check-in on my work. What do I need to know or what's important right now? And I'll pull an oracle card first if I'm going to pair. And if I'm doing this for a client reading, I'll pull it first as well. And I'm looking to the oracle card to provide me sort of a big picture energy, temperature, theme, something that's going to sort of like create a bit of framework for the rest of the reading. So general check-in, what's the energy? What's the sitch with my work? Oh, that one kind of came out. That's cool. And we have Nexus. So this is interesting because I feel like when I look at this card and I think about the keyword Nexus, what I'm feeling is that a lot of my work is starting to become more focused. So instead of feeling like I'm working on like 85 things at the same time, which was definitely my life for a minute, okay? I had projects for other people, projects for myself, all of which were happening all at the same time. And I felt like I was being pulled in so many different directions. And what shifted for me this year is I'm really honing it down. And mostly when I'm working on something, I'm working on one thing at a time. Now, at a time still means I'm shifting. So I'm working a bit on next year's project. And then I kind of come over here and I work a bit on the Unicorn's Journey Oracle, which is still not quite ready for Kickstarter, but hopefully soon. But I'm going back and forth. I'm giving myself space to breathe, which I love how this Nexus is shaped like the lungs. I'm giving myself a little bit of space to breathe, a little bit of room to breathe right now in my work. Okay. That's pretty good temperature check of what's going on in my work. So I start there and I've got kind of like a focal point for my reading. So when I'm reading for myself, so now I'll go into the Heartwood and I'm not asking a question. I'm not giving spread positions. I'm just going to pull 2 tarot cards to complement or to springboard from this theme of Nexus. And I have a couple of ideas based on the visual of this card of how that might function. And this is where you get to be playful and intuitive with it. So I'll come in here and I'll pull a tarot card to each side. So we have the Hierophant on one side. And on the other side, I have the King of Wands. Now, this is really great because to me, this is reminding me of some of my core values when it comes to my work. I want my work to be of service. I want my work to lead, teach, help, inspire, comfort, uplift. Like I've got lots of words I can associate with my work. Empower is huge. I have a lot of, it's sometimes more obvious. Like in the Unicorn's Journey Tarot, there's a self-worth message, like literally in the guidebook. And the entire deck tells a self-worth story and self-worth stories. But I've talked about this before, but like self-worth and learning to recognize yourself, like you matter, like your voice matters, you can take up space in the world. That is a cornerstone of my work and has been for years and years and years and years. Everything I've done, yoga teaching other yoga teachers, tarot, all of it all comes back to this empowerment and self-worth concept. So I have this sort of core nexus to my work around wanting to be of service. So then I'm going to be able to look at these 2 energies and go, how is my work currently doing that? How is my work currently coming into this core value of being of service, of being useful, of empowerment? And I have the King of Wands. Okay, good. Because the King of Wands to me is like a confident, empowering energy. And so that comes in and it's like, okay, so on one side, we have this empowerment energy that's coming into this side of the lungs of this nexus. So my work is currently doing that. Great. Cool. On the other hand, we have the Hierophant, which is coming into the other side. That brings a little bit of that. It may help to unlock something new for somebody in their understanding of tarot. Oh my God, that was absolutely accidental. But that's it. That was absolutely accidental, I swear to God. But I just happened to notice the little key on this window. in this Hierophant card in the Heartwood Tarot. So on one side, we have this idea that like, okay, good, I am helping to like open things up for people. This work is in alignment with my values and my goals. It is helping to unlock things for people. It is bringing in this empowerment and this confidence. So I'm on track. So the way that I read this is that my work is on track with what I want it to be, with what I want it to do. It's functioning the way that I want it to. So I'm in a good place. I might not be getting my work out in the speed I would prefer to be able to for everybody else, but values wise, it's going well. Goal wise, it's going well. I am centered, I am focused, and I'm able to bring in the influences that matter to me. So my work is going really well. So that's just one example. And when I'm reading for clients, it functions in much the same way. So when I'm reading for a client and they've asked a question about an upcoming job, maybe they're looking for work, I'll come here through my Oracle deck. And let's say they've booked a Celtic cross spread, right? So it's going to function differently, and I'm not going to lay out a full Celtic cross, but I'm just going to show you kind of how I work the Oracle deck. So I would pull the Oracle card up first. And this is in addition to whatever they've booked. So they've booked a Celtic cross, or they've booked a relationship reading or whatever. And I would pull the Oracle card first. Okay, we've got transformation. So I would speak to the client about this and be like, okay, it looks like you're going through, you definitely are in a time of change and transition. And that is the overarching energy of what you're dealing with right now. And then I might talk about that a little or a lot, depending on how much information I intuitively get from this, or I would just roll with it, right? So give it a little shuffle, lay out her cards, continue with her reading as normal. But I've gotten a bit of an overarching big picture perspective on the situation. And then I dive in with the reading. So that's how I prefer to do it for clients. Every once in a while, I will pull a card at the end. But if I do that, it's typically going to be a more affirmative card, like a card that has a mantra or an affirmation on it, something positive, something uplifting. But if I'm working with a balanced Oracle deck, and I do prefer to work with a more balanced Oracle deck that could have negative or positive cards in it, difficult or uplifting cards in it, then I'll pull that out at the beginning to kind of get a overarching big picture perspective on their situation or where their energy is right now. So that was, again, long-winded, but I hope it answered your question. We do not have another chat this afternoon, Stardust. We're all good. There were 5 Saturdays this month. So we are having our, Badass Unicorns are having our next tarot test drive live stream next Saturday. We're going to be working with, we're going to be playing around with this deck, the Exquisite Familiars, experimenting with that. So that should be fun. Always lots of fun exercises in that stream for deck bonding and such, because that's a point. We want to see what we can do to sort of get a tarot deck to work, or Oracle deck to work in our practice. That's the point of that stream. But that's next Saturday, I believe, if I remember correctly. So let me put my Oracle of Oddities away, and then we'll do, or to the side anyways, and then we'll do another question. How long have I been on here? Just shy of 2 hours. I know Peggy's like, you'll be on for like 3 or 4. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like a couple hours. We've got questions still, and I'm still having fun, so we're continuing. Okay, Tarot with Jay says, can you use Lenormand in an intuitive way? You can use anything in an intuitive way. You can throw rocks on a table and use them in an intuitive way. So let me start with that. Short version, always. Intuition, always, always. And I don't know about y'all, but if you are an intuitive reader of any kind, or if you tend to read in that more like organic, flowy kind of way, if that's just your style, good luck turning it off. I challenge you to try to turn it off. It's almost impossible to turn it off. But let me grab a Lenormand deck. I will grab, oh my gosh, without throwing the whole thing on the floor. Sure, let's grab Celtic Lenormand. This actually probably works really well for that anyway. Peggy knows. I know. She knows I like to talk. She's like, we're going to be talking for a while. What are you saying? So I've got, oh, it would help if I put my view back. So I've got my Celtic Lenormand here. That's this one, for those of you curious. This is actually really beautiful. I don't use it very much, but it's actually one of my favorites to recommend to beginners because it has just a really great guidebook. And if you're interested in reading Lenormand in a different way, this is a really cool one because it gives you the meaning, but it also gives you a spiritual meaning, a dark and light meaning, a spell use, and a spiritual reading. Wait, I said that already. Spiritual reading, spell use. Oh, and an affirmation. So it's actually got a lot of different ways to work with the Lenormand with this. So it's actually really cool for beginners because it's got like a lot. And I know I say this every time because I've got them under here. There's so many ways you can customize your deck. There's different birds. Like there's 3 different birds to choose from. I've got the owls in, 2 different trees, 2 different snakes, like 2 different riders, a cat or a dog, different children, a different man and woman card, etc. So it's very customizable, which is, I think, kind of unusual for a mass market deck. I keep my extras underneath the box there, but anyway, okay. So let's look at Lenormand and explore what intuitive reading can look like with such a blunt and direct system. Now, I will say there are definitely going to be some Lenormand teachers and readers out there that are going to say it is what it is. Like, you read it the way it is. Sure. But there's always an intuitive layer if you are an intuitive reader, or if you tend to read that way just naturally. Because again, try turning it off. Not going to happen. Okay. So now the reason I don't work with this very often as a Lenormand is because there's a little too much going on in the artwork, and that tends to make it extra difficult for me to turn my intuition off if I'm trying to get a more direct message, which most of the time, if I go to Lenormand, I'm going to Lenormand because I want to get out of my own way. I do want a more straightforward answer, but that doesn't mean that's the way you have to read it. So let's just grab a little, we need a question, like a sample question that might invite some more exploration. What should I be on the lookout for today? Now, that could be a lesson, that could be an experience, that could be a bump in the road, that could be a blessing. But I just want to think, like, what should I be on the lookout for today? That's how I'm going to see that. Okay. So I'm going to put down 2 cards. All right. So we have the 8, which is the coffin. And in this deck, it's like a cave, I think it's meant to be a burial cave or something. And then we have 22, which is the paths card. So again, I wouldn't necessarily, the visuals of this deck do make it challenging for a beginner at times because it's not a little bit non-traditional. Because as you said, you're not seeing a coffin. I happen to know the 8 is the coffin because I've memorized the number association, which is why we did that in the Let's Learn Lenormand Together. But regardless, okay, so intuition. Now, this is cool though, because I have a deck that gives me some more room to roam. My question was, what do I need to be on the lookout for today? Interesting. So we have an ending. If we were to take this like more direct, like more blunt, we have an ending and then we have a choice to make. So something ends and then we have to choose something new. So it's going to be a transition. I'm seeing there's definitely going to be a shift. And in that shift, I'm going to have to pick a new path, right? So there's going to be a new path as a result of something ending. So now intuitively, I can now play a little bit. I can go, okay, well, intuitively, I just keep focusing on the darkness in that cave. I need to be willing to face the unknown. To me, that darkness represents mystery and the unknown. So now I'm thinking, well, something's going to end, but also it's going to invite me to move into a space that is unknown. And that unknown, that openness is going to make it easier. If I explore, if I'm open to that unknown, if I'm open to the mystery, then choosing the path I'm going to take next, choosing which way I'm going to go today is going to be a lot easier. So now I'm kind of getting a message around staying flexible, staying open, not being so rigid that I miss the opportunity to explore something new. So maybe I've got it in my head that today after work, I'm going to come home, Peggy and I are going to have dinner, and then we're going to spend all evening playing Diablo. Not me making expectations, right? But I get this and I'm like, oh, well, maybe that plan isn't going to bear out the way that I'm imagining. But if I'm so rigid about it, I might miss the opportunity for something really cool. Like maybe she's not in the mood to play Diablo, but we're going to maybe she wants to go somewhere. Maybe she wants to go for a drive or go get some shopping done. And if I'm all rigid, but I want to stay home and play Diablo. If I'm like that, right, I might miss the opportunity to do something new and fun and choose a different path. And maybe the choice card here, the path card here, is telling me that maybe I need to be open and be like, okay, I'm going to let my expectations die, right? And I'm going to explore opportunities for how our evening is going to go. So yeah, maybe we explore getting those errands done or doing that little drive or going on that little adventure. And maybe I also suggest some other opportunities and we decide together where we're going to go. So it's more flexible, it's more open. So I've now used my intuition as well as what the cards mean to come to my feedback, come to my answer. So I think you can work with just about any tool and pull your intuition in. I find that easier when I have more to go off of in the art. So if I want to be able to read Lenormand more intuitively, I would probably work with a deck that's more visually interesting like this one. But I tend to prefer working with Lenormand for a straightforward, simple answer. Therefore, I tend to go toward straightforward, simple decks, which is why this one gets so little use in my collection, even though I think it's really gorgeous and super cool. I just don't use it very often because it sort of falls into a space where it lies between kind of tarot and Lenormand for me because it's got enough going on. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question. All right. Diane Gilbert asks, how do you interpret a relatively positive card for a question of what needs changed? Like 6 of Wands in the what part of myself can I shed at this time question. Ooh, I love this. Okay, so let's look at the 6 of Wands specifically because this is such a great example. There we go. There's our 6 of Wands. What part of me do I need to shed? This is such a great card to answer that question. So let's explore it. Now, let's talk about what the 6 of Wands means. So we typically see the 6 of Wands as like victory. This person is riding back. They're being celebrated. They're being lauded. Like, congratulations. Like, you did so good. You won the battle. Woohoo. Like, it's this thing, right? But you know what this card is? What's happening here is a whole lot of external validation, a whole lot of other people validating that this person did really good, right? So when you ask the question, what part of myself can I shed at this time? My first go-to answer to that question based on this card would be the need for other people to validate your wins. You need to learn to bring your own, like, to validate yourself, to know that you, to celebrate your success, whether or not anybody else notices it, to give yourself permission to honor the things that you have done well, even when you're the only one who knows you've done well. So that's number one. And somebody else pointed out, Stardust pointed out, shedding ego and pride. Are you constantly just hungering for this? Are you constantly seeking validation to your own detriment? Are you constantly looking for the wins that can be recognized and losing the point of what it is you're trying to do or accomplish, right? Let's take another really positive card. Okay. Somebody name a positive card so that I'm not biasing it. What's your favorite positive card? Let me know. I'm waiting for the first person to throw in a positive card. 9 of Cups. Okay, cool. Let's do it. So 9 of Cups. And the question was, I'm going to use the same question. What can I shed? Or, okay, actually, let's do a different question just to kind of continue with the spirit of it, but kind of shake it up a little. So now let's say the question is, what, I had a question and then I just lost it. Let me turn this over because I'm getting distracted by it. Okay, so the question, I want to think of a question with a sort of difficult answer. What unhelpful habit? No, that's the same thing. That's like, what do I need to shed? I need like a difficult question. What is, what am I avoiding? Yeah, what am I avoiding? Because we don't usually avoid good stuff, right? So I'll just say, what am I avoiding right now? And I get the 9 of Cups. Now, the 9 of Cups to me is a card of internal contentment, of recognizing that we are all we need, that we have everything we need, that our wishes have been fulfilled because we fulfilled them ourselves. We're not just hinging all of our joy and happiness on others outside of ourselves. Now, that's a very specific to me interpretation of the 9 of Cups typically. So if the question is, what am I avoiding? I might look at this and go, am I not allowing myself to be happy or to deliver my own happiness to myself? Am I hinging all of my happiness on what other people are bringing to me in my life? Am I hinging my happiness on others' actions, behaviors, moods? Am I getting my happiness from a source outside of myself? So I've been avoiding getting my happiness from myself. I've been avoiding turning to myself to solve my problems. Maybe I've gotten a little codependent in my relationships and I'm assuming that everything and everyone else is there to make me feel better. And I'm not doing that for myself. I'm not looking for happiness from within. I'm looking for it from without. And so that to me is one way to do that. So the question is always start with, what does this card mean to me? So in this case, what needs change? Well, what does this card mean to me? And if it's a positive card like the 9 of Cups, that's exactly the process I just walked you through. Here's what the 9 of Cups typically means to me. So if I'm asking myself what I'm avoiding, how does that apply? And so it's kind of a process-oriented answer. If we take a different positive card and we ask that first question, what do I need to shed right now? Let's take the, what was another one somebody gave? Let's scroll. The Sun. Okay. So Sun is like super crazy positive, right? Doesn't get much more joyful and happy than a naked baby on a horse. Am I right? So what do I need to shed? Now here's an interesting concept. There could be a couple places I could take this. So for me, again, we're going to go through the same process. For me, the Sun represents joy and feeling safe enough to be authentic. So basically feeling safe enough to be naked, to be vulnerable, feeling safe enough because that's how good things are in this moment. That's how free you are in this moment. You have this wall to protect you. You're safe within the confines of this space or this experience in life, so much so that you can unmask, you can shed your clothes, you can be vulnerable, right? And so I would see this and go, okay, that's what that's telling me. That's what that's telling me. So I would say, okay, that's what that means. So if it's something I need to shed, have I been walling myself off? Have I been blocking this energy because I'm so busy trying to fit in or meet some external standard that I'm not actually moving myself toward that vulnerability, that authenticity? Or I can take the card at its face and go, what do I need to shed? Maybe I'm being vulnerable with the wrong people. Maybe I'm telling myself that it's okay to be completely myself, but all the signs in this relationship or situation are pointing otherwise. This is not the place to be that vulnerable. Maybe I need to armor myself up a little bit. Maybe I need to shed being vulnerable with the wrong people, being authentic with the wrong people. Maybe I need to dial it back and protect myself a little bit better. So there's ways you can work with the energy, but the first things you've got to do when you're struggling to interpret a card, first ask yourself, what does this card mean to me generally? And then see how you can apply it to the question, despite its default orientation as positive or negative. Lisa turned Canadian. She said process. Did I? Oh, okay. I'm very easily influenced language-wise. It's real bad. It's real bad. When I've been talking to Danny a lot, you'll hear some of her words or language pop out of my mouth. Like I'm such a sponge. It's so true. Okay. I hope that was helpful, Diane. Okay, Tyler asks, is it possible to blend the Thoth and RWS system when it comes to the court cards? Example, yes. Oh, I love this question. Thoth Knight, Princess, where the knight is the seed being planted in creation of fire, the culmination of the suit. And the RWS, where the king is the culmination and maturation of the element. Yes, I have an interesting perspective on this. Keep in mind, I am very much a Thoth beginner, so I'm not going to even try to pretend to know all the things. But I do have a really cool perspective on this because this bugged the crap out of me when I was studying Thoth. And I was like, okay, I need to find my way to unpack this. So I did not make this up that I'm about to share with you. I definitely got this from somewhere. I just don't know where to credit them, but I think this is a really cool way to unpack it. Let me go grab my Thoth. Oh my gosh, I got to like climb over because I've got an air conditioner that came in. we haven't actually installed it yet. So it's just like in my way at the moment. Okay. Not me climbing over my bed to get back to my table. It's fine. Okay. All right. So let me grab a Thoth. This is the Maria, but it's pretty traditional. So let's grab one of the court cards. By the way, this is oh, they're not in order. I thought they were in order. Oh, well. Okay, that's fine. Let's grab the Queen. Oh, wait, maybe they're kind of in order. There's the Prince of Cups. I just need to find some cups. Such a beautiful Thoth, by the way. Absolutely gorgeous. My favorite forever and ever. I also have the Ashura Tarot, which is really beautiful, but I would argue is a little bit more, here's the Princess. Do they have their elemental orientation on them? I don't think they do. That's okay. We just need the Knight of Cups. Now I'm going to see if I can remember how to, I know what's in my head. I just got to remember I got to see if I can remember how to express it. But keep in mind, again, not a Thoth expert. So people who are more comfortable with Thoth can obviously also chime in, please, in the comments with your thoughts. There's the Knight. Okay. So now we have all the cups. Cups, quartz. Okay. So the way that I interpret the elemental association of the court cards, because this is what I'm going to use as my foundation for answering this. Page, Knight, Queen, King. Okay. So, oh my gosh, I need to zoom out. It's way too zoomed in. Okay, that's better. So in the Thoth, the rank order is Princess, Prince, Queen, and Knight. Now in the Thoth, oh gosh, I got too much stuff in my way. Let's go this away so we can get them all. These are big cards. Okay. So Princess, Prince, Queen, and Knight. So Knights are associated with the element of fire. Or if we look at the, I'm going to get the names wrong, Atsaluth, I believe. Oh my gosh. Ask me to remember the names of the different worlds of the Kabbalah, but here we go. Is it in here? I hope it's in here. There's some cool stuff in this, by the way. You have a Deccan wheel. You have the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. These are all the Sephirot. Oh, it's not going to give me the four worlds. And I'm literally reading a book based on Kabbalah, like as we speak, but I just am not going to be able to remember. Anyways, okay. The way one of the layers of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, and what the Thoth has a lot of that it's structured around. Okay, so, as does the RWS. It's just a little bit more, I don't know, subtle, grounded, etc. I don't know how to describe it, but we have sort of the top. We have 4 levels of creation, let's call it. And again, keep in mind, I'm not an expert on this. This is layman speak, beginner speak. Okay, so don't quote me. But we start from fire. So fire is like the topmost, closest to spirit level of creation, and then we move down from fire to water. And then from water to air, and then from air to earth, I think, which is also one of the reasons why the tarot is typically structured in that order: wands, cups, swords, pentacles. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because I might be wrong about some of this, but this is how I've sort of mentally mapped it. Now, for me in the Rider-Waite-Smith, I see the pages, and this is a fairly common association. The pages are associated with earth. You'll typically see them quite grounded. And so the pages are earth. So if you're looking at the Page of Cups, you're looking at water, the cups of earth, or rather earth of water. So this is the earthly part of water. The Page of Cups is the earthly part of water. Now, when you look at the knights are the fiery part of water. They're the active dynamic force, right? This is, again, how I see it. Some people flip these. I'll explain. Then we have the queen. Now, the queen is water of water. She's the watery part of water. And then we have the king, which is air of water. So he's the airy part of water. So I do get into this, I believe, unless I'm making this up, I believe I get into this in Unlocking the Tarot. I can't recall if I did all of a sudden. I'm like, did I write that? Or did I? It's in either Tarot Bootcamp for Beginners or in Unlocking the Tarot, or both. I can't remember. Anyways, so we have this elemental association, and we have a very clear progression that doesn't match up all of a sudden, because it looks to me like the knight is now the prince, and then you have the knight in the position of the king, and he's writing something. So what the heck, what gives, right? So here's what I'm going to invite you to do when you're combining these two. You're going to take, and it does work. It absolutely works, because I've done it. You're going to take your king and move them here, and you're going to move your knight here. And all of a sudden it makes perfect sense. So let's talk about the Thoth. We have the earthy part of water with the princess. So the princess is earth of water. The prince is air of water, and is typically seen seated on a throne, just like our king. Okay. What does a prince become when he's all grown up? He becomes a king. So the prince and the king are actually where these two overlap, not the knight and the prince, which is what I thought for the longest time. It is the prince and the king that are similar. Okay. And then we have the queen and the queen. So those line up. That's easy. Water of water, water of water. Super. And then we have our Knight of Cups in the Thoth, fire of water. We have our active dynamic creation force. All that's changed for me, again, from a beginner's perspective, all that's changed is the order. And it does sort of make sense. If you are looking at this in the creation order of the Tree of Life of Kabbalah, where you have the 4 worlds, again, I forget their names, I'm so sorry, but you have earth being like the physical creation, the manifestation of creation. You have air being the intellectualizing of that creation. You have water being the sort of intuit or the emotional putting forward of that creation. And then the furthest away from the physical creation is fire. That's the inspiration of the creation. That's the seed. So the way this is worded is the night is the seed being planted in creation of fire, versus, let me go back to the second part of the question, versus the culmination of the suit in the RWS, where the king is the culmination and maturation of the element. So I might be talking above heads here a little bit, so tell me to slow down if you need me to. But the way that the RWS was ordered, as Tyler has so eloquently pointed out, is that we see the progression of the suits as the page who wants to become the knight. So we see the page is sort of the beginning of the order of the courts, and then the knight sort of starts to put it into action, and then the queen sort of roots it into the heart and the emotional space and creates a home for that element. And then the king sort of manages the intellectual sort of culmination, the mastery of that element. And what we see happening in the Thoth instead is we see the seed of the element, it kind of moves downward, just like the tree of life does, right? So Knight of Cups. So again, this is all based on, because Nick's pointed out something very clear. This is all based on my personal belief, my association of the knights as fire and the kings or princes as air. That's always worked for me. It works for me visually with the RWS. We always see like a nice balance between air and the other element. At least to me, I see it. Anyways, but there is a case to be made for both systems. Some people swap those. So kings are fire and knights are air. If your king is already fire, then you don't have to do as much wiggling, I think, to kind of make this make sense. But the reason this makes more sense to me, visually especially, is because the Thoth knights are mounted. They are active. They are action. They are force. They are making things happen. They're that dynamic energy. And kings and princes are more stationary. They're in the mind. They're not doing that action. They're not pushing forward. They're in that space. So that is how I have, for me, harmonized the court cards of the Rider-Waite-Smith and the court cards of the Thoth. And as soon as I think of these princes as young kings, the courts of the Thoth make beautiful, perfect sense to me, and I don't struggle anymore. And when I remember that the order of creation is from fire down to water, down to air, down to earth, the court card order in the Thoth also makes perfect sense to me. In fact, arguably, the court card order in the Thoth works a little bit better for the way that I see the courts than the court card system of the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just that I'm more familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and I've become more comfortable with it over time. That makes this just be like home for me. But that is how that works. Aren't these just so freaking beautiful? They're so beautiful, and the symbolism is on point. Like, look at this freaking Seven of Cups. Isn't that gorgeous? Anyway, yeah, so knights have always been air in my head canon, even before I knew about the Thoth deck. So again, I might have just been talking in my butt. So let me just see if knights are actually fire and Thoth. They might not be, in which case you'll have to throw out half of what I just said. But like, that's how I've done it. So I guess I'm answering the question from my own personal perspective still. Nope, they're fire. The knights are fire of their element in Thoth. So yep, in Thoth, the knights are on horses, queens are on thrones, princes are on some sort of moving seat, horses are carts. Oh, right. It is a combination of knight and queen. Yeah, so I think there's different ways to work it. If I pull out let me pull out my traditional Thoth so we can compare, because that Maria might have thrown things off. So let me just climb over my table again and grab, oh gosh, did I put it in storage because I never use it? Probably. Looks like I did. I kept my Maria out, and I probably put in storage my big Thoth. Hold, please. Crawling around my room. Ah, yes, here it is. I have a space where I put decks where I'm like not using them, but also like not rehoming them. That was the Maria Tarot Fortune Read. Okay. You're welcome, Tyler. Like I said, might not have been all that helpful. Okay, so here's my traditional Thoth. So let's grab the cups again. So there's our princess. Ah, yes, this is what you were saying, that they're on like chariots or carts of some kind, moving carts. Gotcha. But they're seated. Again, this is what it comes down to for me. There's our queen and there's our knight. So the princes are still seated. They're still in that throne-like space. They're still moving into. So again, in Thoth, princes are air, correct? So I associate them with the kings of the RWS, which I associate as air. So these two align. This is the prince, younger, more active, but he's moving towards rulership. He's moving towards being a king. He's just a younger version of this guy to me. So these are the same to me. These are the same to me. These are the same to me, and these are the same to me. But again, that's me. I don't know that that's what other people would say. So I definitely appreciate other people giving their thoughts in the chat for sure. Yeah, Teresa says that the prince is seen as a combination of knight and queen. I've heard that perspective as well. This is the one that made sense in my brain. This is what worked for me. But again, could be different depending on your perspective, depending on how you view these particular cards. But that is how I have worked it in my brain. So yes. Really cool question. I don't actually get a lot of Thoth-based questions, and so it's kind of fun to test my memory on the things, because I don't read actively with the Thoth. If for anybody looking, it was this deck, the Maria Tarot by Maja Kulinovic. I do not know if this is currently available. I backed this on Kickstarter. It is on beautiful linen cardstock. It's breathtakingly gorgeous. Human art. Love it. Gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Okay. Anyways, page, knight, queen, king. Okay, I'm trying to keep my one RWS in order so I can use it for reference. We'll see if I can actually maintain that. But okay, let me check and see what our next question is. Stardust asks, I was doing practice readings and got a spread that screamed infertility struggles because that's something I dealt with. I froze, worried it was something I was seeing due to my own. Okay, yeah. How do you take yourself out of the equation in such scenarios? The number one thing I do, first of all, the number one thing I do when I feel internal bias, fear, or anxiety kick in, I go to the guidebook. I just read the entire guidebook entry. This is like the easiest way I can think of to answer this question, because the guidebook to me is the next best thing to having another real person read that card for you. You're getting the author or creator of that deck to tell you what they think it means. And so you have this outside perspective on the card's meaning that you can lean into. So that is number one. I would read the guidebook. I would read the guidebook entry. If I don't get enough out of that, if I'm still feeling caught up in my own bias of what I think it might mean, then I'll go to a bigger book. I'm going to show you my book again. I'll go to it's just handy. I'll go to any book. Like for me, I might go to 78 Degrees of Wisdom, right? Or I might go to, Tarot Deciphered, or I might go to, I have a self-care tarot book that I refer to sometimes. I might go to that, but I'll pull another book, or I'll pull another deck that I know has a meaty book, or enough meaty that I know I'll get an entry out of it, and I'll read. And I treat the reading of the guidebook a little bit like bibliomancy. What is jumping out at me? And I'm looking for that neutral voice. I'm looking for that unbiased voice. What is this card actually telling me right now? Not my fear, not my anxiety. What is this card telling me right now? And then worst case scenario, I will walk away from the spread. I will either take a picture of it so I can reflect on it later, or I'll leave it on a table. I'll walk away. I'll do something else for a bit, maybe for a day or so, and then I'll come back and I'll sit with it again. So you pull the objectivity in by pulling another voice in. That's what I do. But sometimes all you need is space. All you need is space and distance. You can also use cards to move yourself through anxious responses to cards. So let me show you what that looks like. This is really easy. So basically, let's say this is a little bit like what we talked about earlier with getting being in conversation with your cards, right? So I'll use the Monster Tarot again because it's handy. So you've gotten an answer and you're like, is this really about this? This really seems like it's about this. And you're kind of in your head about it. Sorry, let me flip my view here. You're in your head about it. So you shuffle your cards while you're looking at the cards you already have down. You shuffle the rest of your cards and you're like, okay, this is an easy question to ask if you're anxious about something. And it's great to do this with tarot. You ask yourself, what is the evidence that this is what this is? And what is the evidence that this isn't what this is? And this is a great exercise to do with or without cards if you're feeling anxious. Okay, I'm convinced somebody's going to die. That's a common anxiety. Or I'm convinced somebody's going to never talk to me again, whatever it is. So you're like, okay, what is the evidence that this person is about to not talk to me ever again? And I'll pull a card. Judgment. Okay, I guess if they go through a major life change and they've been called to this whole new life, they might never talk to me again. So that might be evidence for that anxious answer. But then I'm going to pull a card and say, what is the evidence against? Oh, this person isn't about to do life changes. Maybe they're going through some hard times. Maybe they've recently been sharing that they're I feel like everything just froze. Are we still here? It froze on my end. I don't know if it froze on y'all's end, but it froze over here. Anyway, so you get the Five of Pentacles for evidence why this isn't true. And you're like, oh, okay. And so what I would do typically is I would build on that. I'd be like, okay, well, they've been going through a rough time. So they're probably not ignoring me. They're probably just still going through a hard time. So I might even pull more evidence. What's more evidence that that's not what's going on? Oh, Three of Cups. Look at how strong our friendship is. We're good. We're solid. And then I might pull another one. Oh, she's just busy. She's distracted. And so I'd go through this kind of thing. But I always start with first acknowledging the fear. What is the possible evidence that this fear is true? And then what is evidence against that proves that it's not true? And then I would usually put more of my energy into those because that's usually what I need in that moment. That's one way you can work through it. Lists are great for this without cards because then you won't get in your head about it, but you can literally pull out a piece of paper. What is the evidence that this is what's happening? And what is the evidence that this is not what this is happening? 9 times out of 10, if not more, I find that when I do that exercise, I realize I've got much less reason to be anxious than I think I do. So that's a helpful thing. But in general, with cards, you can build on that conversation by simply saying, okay, so you've laid the reading out. This is where you've got, this is the answer you think you have. And you can say, you can ask a more direct question and build on that. Like, how can I soothe my own fears that this is about infertility? How can I soothe my own fears? What do I need to know to calm myself down? Because I feel like that's what this is about. And you pull 3 cards and you go, oh, look at all these cards, like 2 of Cups, 6 of Cups, 9 of Cups. And you use those cards to soothe yourself, right? Now, this also might be a great time to pull out a deck you know isn't going to give you shadowy garbage. If you know you're feeling anxious and that you probably don't need to be, then pull follow-up cards from a deck that is going to make you feel comforted. So something that's going to have a little bit more of a positive spin might be helpful. What if you're being triggered while you're reading for someone else, like seeing my issues in their cards? Okay, look, I am like the master. If somebody else is going through something negative, I'm like, am I doing that? Like, okay, it doesn't matter what it is. If somebody is having an argument with somebody and I think the other person is being a jerk, I'm immediately like, am I being a jerk right now? Oh my God. And then I like start looking for it, like in myself. There's a certain personality type, I guess I'm one of them, that has the tendency to do that. What I would recommend and what is helpful is to do your best when you're reading for somebody else to intentionally put yourself to the side. That reading is not about you. You didn't pull those cards for you. You didn't pull those cards with yourself in mind. You pulled them for the other person. There's nothing in that reading that is for you. There will never be, my opinion, there will never be anything in that reading that is for you. That reading is for them. It has nothing to do with you. Now, as a human, you might relate to their situation. You might see yourself in some of those cards, but that reading was not for you. That reading was pulled for them. So, number 1, remind yourself, this isn't about you. Get yourself out of the equation. You're not on the table. Your client is, or your friend is, or whoever you're reading for. They're who's on the table. You're not on the table. They are. So number 1, refocus on your person. Refocus on your person because you are not the point of the reading. They are. So I think it's really important to keep them centered in your heart, mind, thoughts while you're reading the cards. If you catch yourself reflecting and wondering how it might apply to you, remind yourself, wait, but this reading isn't for me. These cards are for them, right? So yeah. Amber says that's a part of the reflection, though, co-creation of reality between 2 energies. So if you see yourself in the read, that's just showing the truth that we really are all one on a bigger macro level. Yeah, it is. I cannot tell you how many months. Well, you've seen it because you've been in it, Stardust. We do our monthly member readings. How often do you see the readings harmonizing? We see repeating themes show up again and again and again in monthly member reads. I'm there reading for 50, 60 people in one day. And we see those readings harmonize. We see that we are all struggling with similar things. Maybe it's astrology. Maybe we're all whatever. Maybe we're all on similar wavelengths. Maybe we're all going through similar things because that's a thing that happens. But we will see ourselves in other people's readings all the time. But the question is, when you're actively reading for somebody else, I do think you need to get yourself out of the way for sure so that you can focus on them. But just remember that there is a certain amount of just shared human experience, like Amber pointed out, that we are all having. So it's normal to see yourself reflected in other people's situations. I think that's just normal. That's also a part of empathy. We can see or experience or imagine what we feel like in their situation, or we can see how we've been through something similar. And that's a valid part of what you bring to the table as a reader. You do bring your own experiences. You do bring your past to the table with you. It's just a matter of doing that in an ethical way, so you're not bringing so much of yourself that you lose your client in the reading. Does that make sense? Okay. I think Hollow's question is going to be the last. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more questions, I think. And then I'm going to call it. So Twirl says, how does one start a shadow practice? Oh my goodness, this is a big question. for starters, you need to know what that is for yourself. You have to first define it. If you want to do shadow work, you have to first decide what that is and define it, because there's a lot of different definitions. And for some, shadow work is so intense and so deep and so challenging that it's only safe and worth doing with a qualified like mental health professional. For others, shadow work is like is the concept of just deeply going into yourself. And if you feel safe to do that and you feel equipped to do that, then cards can be a great tool to assist. I like to, when I'm working with cards for shadow work, I like to work with cards that are going to call me out, because that's what I'm looking for. So I might grab my emotional baggage deck here. Oh, I got to change my view again. I might grab Reclaim. I might grab, where's my little, hello? Oh, there you are. I might grab Deviant Moon. I'm just going to grab the mini because it's here. Okay. So Deviant Moon's great for me, for shadow work, because I find that the cards tend to lean a little bit more towards a shadowy meaning just by the way that they're depicted. Zoom it in, because these are teeny. These are so little. Here's my finger. They're so little. For example, in the Justice card, we can see a creature being held in one hand. We can see a creature under their robe. This is not fairness. There's something unfair going on here, right? In the Seven of Pentacles, where we're normally reflecting on what seeds have been planted and how things are going here, this person is poking the tree and making it bleed in their eagerness to check on how things are going. Are we maybe being a little too aggressive and assertive in how we're checking on things? Are we being too micromanagey, a little too controlling in trying to control? You know what I mean? So this tends to lean towards, here we have the Nine of Cups, a positive card, but we already know stories of genies and lamps and how the wishes can get turned on their head and be misused, right? So this deck helps me to look for the more shadowy meaning and get out of my own way when I don't want to see those difficult truths. So I like decks like this that have a slightly more, because of the nature of the art style, the fact that it leans a little creepier and darker, I'm more likely to look for the more shadowy interpretation that I don't want to see, right? Look at this Eight of Cups. She's like literally trying to avoid looking at where she's invested, and she's walking. So yeah. Sorry, hello. I know I've been here for a bit, so I think I'm going to call it pretty soon here. So I'm going to get to your question about reading for someone who knows tarot, but I think that's going to be the last one, just so I can call it today. But definitely bring your questions. We'll do another one of these next month. But anyways, so back to the shadow practice. So using a tarot deck that helps you to see the more shadowy meaning can be helpful. It also helps to come to a shadow work practice of cards with knowing what you're going to ask and asking questions that are in alignment with how you view shadow work. So if you're like, I want to know what bad habit or negative trait, this is only one way to look at shadow work. We're going to clarify. What negative trait might I be ignoring, not working on, avoiding thinking about or looking at or making progress on? And then I might pull a card to answer that question, right? Sometimes though, shadow work has three types in my view. Again, everything is caveated with these are my interpretations, my opinions. But for me, shadow work can be one of three things. It can be something difficult about ourselves or our experience that we have sort of shoved away because we have compartmentalized and we don't want to address it, deal with it, work on it, grow from it. It's uncomfortable. It's easier to avoid than to face, that kind of thing. So that's like the negative sort of stuff. Then you have neutral things. These are things that just happen to be qualities about yourself or things about your experience or things about your way of looking at the world that you've compartmentalized because they're just easier to ignore than to address. Again, these can be neutral things. They don't have to be negative. And then there's positive things about ourselves that we pocket away because maybe we were shamed for them. Maybe we were told, like maybe you used to sing out loud in the car as a kid and like you always had a parent or a sibling make fun of you every time you sang. So now you don't sing, but you might have a beautiful voice. You might enjoy singing, but you've compartmentalized it because it's something that has negative associations or that you've just learned to hide away. So shadows, things that we put into shadows are not always negative things. They're just often things that we have buried, hidden, or avoid looking at for a variety of reasons. So again, you have to I think you should come to the cards if you're going to do shadow work with cards with a question that helps you peek into that. So an easy way to do that is to literally ask cards, any deck that you think will do good at this. You can even just use a regular old Rider-Waite-Smith. And a lot of people actually find it easier to do shadow work with really uplifting, positive looking cards because it's just less beat you over the head. I happen to like a little self-flagellation, so I tend to go to darker cards that are going to call me out. That's what I like. I feel like that helps me to be honest with myself, but some people might want a gentler touch. Reclaim is almost all, it's basically a deck of emotions, a deck of emotional experience. And so this can be really poignant. So I might say, what is one thing currently in my shadow that I have not been addressing lately or that I'm currently ignoring, but that is having an impact on my life, my day-to-day life in the present. So I will shuffle a deck like Reclaim for that. Ooh. And remember, because Reclaim isn't all, I just totally messed up that shuffle. Because Reclaim is a deck that does not have just negative cards in it. So you'd want to use, for this, I think you want to use a balanced deck, something that has neutral, positive, and shadowy associations. Actually, my upcoming, I swear to God, I'm not trying to plug all the time. I'm excited about my stuff. But Unicorn's Journey Oracle has a balance of positive, neutral, and shadow intentionally baked into its structure. So that might be a cool one to do this sort of thing, this sort of work with. For me, it'll be perfect because it's all the stuff that anyway. I designed it, so it's going to be perfect for me for that. But anyway, okay, so shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. So something in my shadow. Oh, look, we have denial. So now I can add tarot to this to really beef up the message. Now that I've got my answer, okay, well, here's something I've been dealing with is some denial. Okay, all right, cool. Love that for me. I'm gonna actually pull Mon's tarot just for fun and for the juxtaposition because I think it's fun. Okay, what am I in denial about? What am I in denial about? Let's just call me out in front of like 100 people. That's fine. We can do that. It's fine. Okay, what am I in denial about currently? Opportunities. Yes, for sure. Scared to take the next step on my next project? Abso-freaking-lutely. I have my pre-project launch jitters. I have a lot of fear of success. There's ways in which a successful project or work for me is very exposing in a way that's kind of uncomfortable. I don't always really love that feeling. It takes me a minute to get comfortable. It also is very difficult for me to claim success, for me to take credit, I guess you could say, for success. That's hard for me. It is a bit of a shadow that I definitely deal with. So I'm in a bit of denial about maybe opportunities in my life right now. That's valid. That definitely happens. And we have the Page of Cups. I was just speaking about this, the vulnerability piece, the being in a fishbowl. So I always tend to drag my feet a bit as I get closer to a project launch. That's why we don't have a Kickstarter campaign out for Unicorn's Journey Oracle yet, because I hit this point and I'm like, I'm scared to move forward. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. And that's happened with all of my projects. I know this feeling. I have befriended it. I understand it, but I still tend to compartmentalize it a bit and not look at it in the face, right? So here I've gotten a very effective shadow work reading simply by just asking the question first of one deck, what is in my shadow right now that I should maybe address? It's having an impact. And then I used tarot to sort of build on that, right? That's an easy way to just begin to dip into shadow work practice. Now, don't forget, if you've got some intense stuff lurking in your shadow, you might pull a card like this and get something quite intense in response, and you might not be prepared. So my advice always when doing any kind of shadow work is first, know your own level, know what you are capable of handling and hearing. And that's always going to have to come first. Secondly, don't be afraid to pick it all up, put it away, and walk away. You do not have to sit with a message that is taking you to a place you don't feel equipped to handle in that moment. We always say, never scoop up your cards and don't sit with them. Yeah, unless you just got triggered and you need to freaking walk away. You might not be ready for that message right now. That's valid. So that's number one. Give yourself permission always to walk away from an uncomfortable shadow work, pull, draw, journaling, prompt, whatever. If it is hitting you and you're like, if it's spiraling you, if you find yourself really struggling, walk the hell away. Give yourself permission to come at it again a different day. That's completely valid. Number two, have someone on standby. Have somebody you know you can reach out to. If you're about to do some shadow work, maybe don't do it, number one, when you're in a bad place. If you're already anxious and struggling, that is not the time to do shadow work. Shadow work is something to do when you feel strong, confident, comfortable, pretty grounded. But if you're going to do some shadow work, if you're going to pull cards intentionally to call yourself out, make sure you have somebody in your life, friend or even an acquaintance that you have that kind of relationship with, but a friend, or it could be a therapist, somebody that if you get actively really like triggered, or if it really takes you to a place that you're like really struggling, you have somebody you can just kind of unpack with a little bit. Hey, I pulled a card, I'm feeling bad, or just somebody you can be around so you're not alone. Sometimes that's important too. So always care for your mental health first when doing this kind of work. That is critical. And I think sometimes we bandy about shadow work, no big deal. And we don't talk about the deeper, darker places of it. And it can be a lot. I've been doing intentional shadow work since I was like 21 years old. So I feel like it's easy breezy, no big deal for me. But I still get triggered by my own work. So it is a thing, especially if you have trauma, especially if you have a past. Things can come up that you might not be ready for that day, no matter how many years of comfort and practice you have with doing shadow work. So give yourself permission always to honor yourself, your limits, and treat yourself with kindness, compassion. Super important. That was a big question. It was a big question, but I hope that was helpful. Okay, I've got 3 more on my list, and then we're going to be wrapping it. So Lolita's Revenge. Hey, my question is what to do after the reading. I'm able to do pretty accurate reading, but unfortunately, I'm unable to apply those things in real life. Any tips on that? Thanks. Yeah, so start with deciding before you pull a reading what you're going to do with what you're going to do with that information. That's easier said than done. But it's like, okay, if I'm going to pull a daily reading, let's say, energy obstacle advice, I'm only going to do that if I'm prepared to take the advice. So if I get an advice card that says I need to like listen more than I talk today, like that's going to be important, then I might write that down on a sticky note. One thing I did for a long time, and this is super helpful, is I would, whatever my card of the day was, let's say, why do I need to visual aids? It's just I like to talk with my hands. That's what it is. But anyways, so the Fool is my card of the day. I'm going to get out my phone and I'm going to take a picture of that card and put it as my wallpaper for the day. So I can keep that message in mind and apply it throughout my day, right? I keep not putting the right view up. But yeah, so I would apply it throughout my day. So I would do that. Some people like to take a picture of their card and put it in their journal and write about how they're going to incorporate that message that day. It's using the cards. Let's be real for a second. Okay. Using the cards is no different than asking anybody for advice or looking up advice on the internet or whatever. Like, how should I handle this situation? What should I do? So how many times in your life have you gotten really amazing advice and just struggled to put it into practice? It's exactly the same thing. We're humans, and especially hard work. We are hardwired, all of us, to walk away from hard work. Hard work is hard. We don't always want to do hard things. Sometimes we just want to stick our heads in the sand and go play a video game or like lose ourselves in a fantasy book or playing outside with our kids, and we don't want to stop and think about or apply whatever that difficult piece of advice was. So if you can, my advice is to practice in small ways, like in a daily energy obstacle advice card, of trying to keep that advice in your mind throughout the day. Like I said, maybe you make it your phone wallpaper for the day. So every time you open up your phone, that's the first thing you see. And that reminds you that, oh yeah, I'm trying to focus on this today. It's no different than building any other habit. I would say I easily throw away or forget to apply half the advice I give myself in my cards. It's a very human tendency. So if you're trying to apply it in a particular way, try to find a way to keep it front of mind or keep it present. Maybe you write yourself an affirmation based on that card. So let's say like the reading I just did about getting out of my own way and not letting fear of success stop me from moving forward. I might write down a little message to myself, a little reminder that a little work every day on my project will help me move it forward, even when I'm feeling the fear. And I might remind myself, I might send myself a quick email and be like, hey, remember to work on Unicorn's Journey Oracle Guidebook today, because you really need to get that finished so you can order your samples and like get your Kickstarter going. That might be what I do. But like, it's like anything else. If you get really great advice, it's very easy to just go, oh, good advice, and then just like discard it. It's easy to do. So set yourself some sort of physical, tangible reminder to hold it close and keep it with you, and that will help. But it's no different than building any other habit or taking any other kind of advice. If you don't do something tangible to put it into practice right away, the chances that you're going to discard it go up and up and up. So the further it gets from your memory, the easier it is to not apply it. So that's what I would say about that. Fina Ray says, do you sometimes use 2 tarot decks, but use one as an oracle? And if so, how do you decide and how does that affect your reading? This is tricky because I want to do this more, but I don't. In practice, I've maybe done this a couple of times. And you can totally pair 2 tarot decks and use one to function as an oracle and one to function as like the tarot. But in my brain, that's how I have to brain it. That's how I have to like mentally associate it. But for whatever reason, I have a difficult time putting 2 tarot decks together. unless I give them a specific function. So I actually have done this in my monthly envelope readings, which you guys might have seen before the end of the year. I pre-dole out readings, put them in envelopes, and open them each month and each full moon. So what I did this year, actually, and I used I have multiple copies of here I am with my visual aids again. I have multiple copies of both of these decks. So I have multiple copies of the Mons Tarot, and I have multiple copies of Deviant Moon. So I have my full-size Deviant Moon, and then I have this little mini. So for what I did is throughout the envelope readings for this year, I actually so I guess I do it more than I think. Anyways, so this year I decided that I was going to have a light and shadow theme to my monthly readings. So when I doled out my month ahead, I used I think my first edition. Yeah, I think it was my first edition Mons Tarot. And for every month, I have a single, let me pull a different card because we already looked at that one and that one. Here, let's use that one. So I have a single card pull from Mons Tarot and a single card pull from Deviant Moon. And the premise, when I shuffled those cards and dealt them out for myself for the month, the idea was that the Mons Tarot was going to represent something positive, something affirmative that I could, integrate into my month or whatever, or a lesson from the month that was going to be positive. And then the Deviant Moon's function was to be the shadow. So light and shadow. There is a deck out there. I'm not going to grab it because I know we're nearing the end here, but it's the As Above, So Below deck set by Llewellyn. It's by Barbara Moore. That's kind of cool because there's like literally As Above, So Below. That might work really nice for a light and shadow. Maybe. I have my Wisdom of the Divine Feminine and my Wisdom of the Shadow Oracle decks, and those work really beautifully as light and shadow, but those are oracles. But basically, you can just pick a tarot based on its theming to serve one function in a reading, and then pick another tarot because of its theming that functions in a different way. So like a deck like the Tarot of Mystical Moments might make a really great deck to bring in where do I need to, like, whenever you pull a card from that, it'll be like, what is the dream? What will inspire me? What is the dream energy? And then you might have another deck really grounded, like the RWS or the This Might Hurt. And you might use that deck to be like, how can I take that dream and make it reality? Now you're using two different tarot decks based on their themes, kind of, to serve a different function in the reading. But that's how I have to kind of mentally sort it out. I don't easily just go throw two tarot decks together very often. So there has to be for me, there has to be like a reason, like a purpose. Like, why am I using two different tarots? And I often find that it's easier and works better for me to pair tarot with oracle than tarot with tarot. But that hopefully answers your question and gives you an idea of like how I might do something like that, how I have in practice done something like that before, and how it's functioned. But I like to pre-decide, okay, what role is this deck going to play and what role is that deck going to play? And if you have pre-assigned roles, then it's easier, I think, to pair multiple decks in general. I mean, in truth, I do the same thing with Oracle. I decide that the Oracle is going to be the energetic overview of the situation. And so that's what that deck does when I pull a card. And the tarot is going to give me the details, right? You can do the same thing if you pair tarot and Lenormand, which I think actually is a question we have on the list. But you decide what the function is going to be of each thing that you're pulling in, and then you let that thing do its job. And then you have context. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so our last question of the day, and then we're going to wrap this up because we're coming up on 3 hours, is from Hollow Tarot. How do you feel reading for someone who knows tarot? Intimidated. And I think that's normal. I think that's normal. I think I'm just intimidated and like wary because and usually I'll disclaimers take away so much anxiety for me. I swear, when I'm reading in any situation, if I have a nervousness or a self-consciousness, I throw that crap on the table right away. Not in a way where I'm dumping it on my client. That's different. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think we're trying to hold space for our client, but I will definitely own my stuff. Like, for example, I'm reading for somebody who knows tarot. I know they know tarot. So I might say something to them like, and just so you know, I definitely have an intuitive approach to the card. So there's going to be plenty of times where I may read a card differently than its traditional meaning, just so you're prepared. Now let's get into it. I am not making apologies for my reading style. I am not saying they might not like it or I hope that's okay with you. I'm saying, FYI, this is my approach. By doing that, I have given myself permission not to feel like I need to adjust my reading style on the fly to fit this other person's expectations. I've given myself permission to read the way I know I'm going to read or want to read in an authentic way. And I've reminded myself that I don't need to change anything to meet this person's standard or expectations. by saying that out loud, I set a tone for myself. I'm not doing that for them. They don't need that. They probably don't care. Another tarot reader is not going to come to you for a reading unless they want your perspective on the cards. So really all you need to do in that moment, I think, is remind yourself that that's okay. And then you can go, which is why disclaimers and things help me. For example, if I'm feeling nervous that somebody is going to take my advice as like law, I do say this a lot, I'll remind them, hey, you're the master of your life. You are the decider of your destiny. I am not the boss of you. You are the boss of you. So if something I say doesn't sit right, doesn't feel right for you, throw it away. I am not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm here to tell you what the cards say. So you get to decide how you're going to incorporate that. And so I have then reminded myself that I have empowered my client. And then after that, it's out of my hands. I've told them not to just take my word as law. So I'm not going to sit there in anxiety throughout the reading, worrying that they're going to take everything I say and automatically mean this is how it has to be forever and ever, you know? So that's how I sort of strategically use disclaimers as a way to hold true to my method of reading and not let those things derail me. And that gives me a lot of confidence as a tarot reader. But ultimately, something else, by the way, that really helps, if you're reading not in person, you can even do this if you're reading in person. It just requires a weird way of reading that most people aren't going to want to do. But if you are, see again with the visual aids, I got to do it. Okay. If you're reading for somebody, I do this in my member readings 99% of the time, by the way, because all of us who are, I should say all of us, but I assume that most people in my channel membership also work with cards. So I just naturally found myself starting to do this, and it's an incredible way to not get in your head about what anybody else might be thinking about your cards as you lay them down. But if you're doing a reading where, like, let's say you're doing a Zoom style reading where you're facing them camera to camera, or you've got somebody across, when you've got somebody across the table, it's harder because they're going to see the cards on the table. But if you're like online, it's really great because you can totally do this. And this is what I do in my member readings. I will do my reading. So I typically will pull 2 to 3 cards for most member readings. So I'll answer the question. There's no fixed spread positions, and I'll lay them down. And so I'll give myself a second to take in what I see. Now, if I had somebody looking at me this way, I'll usually tell them, I'm going to look at the cards for a second and then I'll start talking, or I'll need a minute. I'll take a sip of my drink. Whatever. I always give myself a second to take in what's on the table. And then I'll first figure out what the cards are saying. I don't care what the other person thinks because they're not looking at my cards yet. If they're like Zoom to Zoom, you know what I'm saying? And in today's tech world, this is easier. You could, in theory, do this in person by holding your cards like a poker hand. Nothing saying you can't do that, but it's a little difficult if you're laying out cards. Most clients aren't going to expect that. They're going to want to see the cards, right? But this is great to practice, like I said, online. It's just to have your cards in front of you. This is really important. You do not have to show your work to who you're reading for, whether they're a reader or not. You do not have to explain how you got to the answer. You just need to give them the answer. And in fact, I would argue that most people don't want, need, or even always like that. You don't need to convince them why it's okay that you got the interpretation you got. They're coming to you because they're seeking you out as somebody who's going to guide them through an experience. So with that being said, it's not necessary to, and I'm saying show your work. I actually got that phrase, I'm pretty sure, from a talk Barbara Moore and Charles Harrington did at a tarot conference. So full credit to them for the wording of show your work. But I've definitely been doing this for a long time in my readings, is like with members or with other readers, is I will literally just give the answers. Okay, this is what I'm getting. This is what I get for your reading. And members can attest, this is how I read. And then at the end of my member reading, once I've given the answer for the most part, I will then show the cards. Okay, this is the card I got. I got this, and I got this. So that's how I got there. Done. Now, if you as a reader want to take a picture and then unpack it yourself, you're more than welcome to. But I have not let that get in my way. I put them back in a weird order, but whatever. I have not let that get in the way of me reading. I've given my interpretation, and I have not explained or justified how I got there, because I'm going to trust myself as a reader to give them the message that they need. And then I will say, I have had it happen where you're reading for somebody and they know the cards too, and they want to chime in and give their interpretation. And that can be really challenging as a reader. I froze for a second. It can be really challenging, and it can undermine, and it can also break your flow, and it can be difficult. But at the end of the day, you are providing a service to that person. If they want to chime in and give their thoughts, they're more than welcome to. And so usually if somebody's like, well, yeah, but couldn't that also mean that? It's like, of course it can. Sure it can. This is just what I'm getting from the cards right now. Obviously, feel free to take a picture of the cards and pull them from your favorite deck or unpack them in your own time. But I will just hold to this is what I'm getting from the cards. And, you know, of course, other interpretations are completely valid, but this is mine because that's what they've paid you for in theory, right? That's what they've come to you for. They've come to you to give your interpretation. And sometimes clients will get in their own way a little bit and get kind of hung up on what they think the card means. And that can be hard as a querent if you're a reader to not be like, but I think it means this. That's normal. That's human. But I would just say, hold your ground. You know what your reading was. You know what your interpretation is. Be kind and loving about it. Some readers get really flustered by this and get like frustrated. I don't get frustrated. It can break my flow a little bit, but mostly it's like, yeah, fair, valid. Absolutely. That's a valid interpretation of that card because any interpretation can be valid in the right circumstance. This is what I'm getting. But you may need to weave that in with your own understanding of the cards to arrive at your ultimate answer. There's nothing wrong with me telling them that their interpretation can also be valid, unless I think they're way out to lunch. Okay. If they're just looking for an answer they want to hear, then I might pull back and go, well, you know, absolutely, you need to come to your own decisions about what this means. This is what I think the cards are saying in this context, but sit with it a while, see what feels right for you, and go on with your bad self, live your life. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, you've got to recognize that it is not your job to force the client to see it your way. Your job really is to just give your interpretation and let them do with that what they will. You're not in control of them. You can't decide for them. But it can be a little jarring when somebody's chiming in with their interpretations as you're reading, and it can make it difficult to get into the intuitive or to the trust yourself flow. And it can really shake you if you're a new reader. It can just be intimidating. If you read for somebody who you know knows tarot, you're going to get in your head about like, oh my God, what if I say it wrong? What if I say the wrong thing? It's not wrong. They're there for your perspective, they're not coming to you to teach them tarot. Right? In which case y'all can have a debate about what the cards mean. That's not what you're doing. You're giving them a reading. And if you're giving them a reading, then the punchline, the point of that reading is to give your perspective. It's kind of like content creation here on YouTube, right? 25 of us will make this a review or a walkthrough of the same deck. We're not all going to say the same thing. And people are watching my walkthrough to hear my perspective on the cards, not to hear what is correct necessarily, but to get my perspective. And it's exactly the same thing with reading for a client who happens to also know tarot. They're there to get your perspective. I go to readers because I want their perspective on my situation. And I try to stay out of the way of that. But I still sometimes have a moment, I'm sure, where I've been like, well, what about this? What about this layer? And sometimes that's the whole reason we're going to another reader in the first place, is because we want that perspective. But sometimes we still struggle to let go of control. You know, that can be a thing. So it's very human. It's very understandable. It can be a little bit intimidating, but it's just trust and believe, number one, that if somebody who knows tarot is coming to you for a reading, they're interested in you. Obviously, if they know how to read tarot, they're not there just because they don't know how to read the cards for themselves. They're there because they want your perspective. So give it to them unashamedly, confidently, because that's what you're there for. So I hope that helps. Y'all, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you are watching this back later and have your own thoughts to share about any of the topics that we discussed today, please do that down below. But obviously, let's keep it kind, constructive, respectful. We can all have different perspectives, and that's totally valid. People generally behave themselves pretty well in my comment section, so continuing to do that would be awesome. But all good. And if you are watching this back or you were watching it live, once the comment section is available for you to comment, if you have specific requests for comments or for chunks of this video you think would be good to put as a clip video, let us know. I'll probably clip most of the substantive answers and turn them into clip videos, but I may have to pick people's favorites or whatever ones were the most felt the most useful. So if you have a vote on which ones might make good clip videos, obviously drop that down below. But I'll probably clip this out sometime over the next week and start rolling those out. I've been rolling the clip videos out from this stream on Thursdays, so or thereabouts. So yeah, might be a little bit depending on how long it takes me to do the editing. But thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate you all so much. As always, extra big thank you goes out to my Unicorn Fam channel members. Thank you for your support. Thank you for playing along. Thank you for being so attentive, coming. Thank you for coming to my live stream so consistently. I appreciate you all so much. You all know who the diehards are, and I really appreciate seeing your faces.
But thank you to everybody watching. Thanks for hanging out. Do leave a comment. And if you are enjoying this content, if you enjoy my content, hitting the subscribe is really helpful for me, but it also is a really great way to always find my content because YouTube's algorithm is wild these days. I don't know how it recommends half the stuff to me it recommends, but if you want it to start seeing my videos consistently, you can just click your subscription feed and all the channels you've subscribed to, all of their videos will be there. Not necessarily all the live streams, but the videos will be there. And you won't have to go hunting for them. So it's a convenient way to stay connected to the channels you appreciate and watch regularly. But anyway, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out.